So, good morning and welcome to today's PiP seminar on housing and residential development. I'm Helen Castle. I'm the publishing director at RIBA. I oversee the journal, book publishing, retail, as well with RIBA bookshops. And I'm the host of this morning's webinar. PiP, that is Products in Practice, is the RIBA's technical supplement featuring projects and products. And the PiP webinar series offers us unique insights into leading projects and products with talks by award-winning architects and class-leading manufacturers. The next seminar in this series is going to be in April, and that's going to be on educational buildings. So we'll be sending through news of that in a few weeks. But first of all, I want to say a big thank you today to our sponsors, Oscar's Acoustics, VM Zinc, and Bridgestock. Without their support, we could not deliver this event. And also a big thank you to our architect speakers, Caroline Dove of HTA, Matt Bridgestock of John Gilbert Architects, Kristofer Adelaide of KAA, Deramore Hutchcraft of AKACommunity, and David D'Souza of AHR. The audience is a very important part of the PiP webinars, and your participation provides an opportunity for exchange. So we really want you to share sector expertise with us and to ask questions. Now, you'll see at the bottom that you've got both a Q&A chat and a chat. So please use the Q&A rather than the chat to ask questions. I'm afraid if you use the chat for questions, I just won't see them, I'm afraid. Particularly, we've got so many people joining us today. So please use the Q&A for that. So if you haven't done already, please put your name and your location in the chat. It was just great to see that fantastic stream of people coming through, not only from throughout the UK, but across the world. Really exciting. We're going to have a comfort break at 10 o'clock, just for 10 minutes. And just to tell you, please leave your webinar on when you leave to have your break. If you go and make yourself a cup of tea or stretch your legs, just leave us on and then come back to us. So I'll remind you of that later though. So we're going to crack on and introduce today's programme. It's really fitting that we start 2021 with a webinar on housing. Never have we spent more time indoors and been more aware of our own domestic surroundings, and also the impact of inequality of housing provision on each other's lives, with living, working and education all taking place in the confines of the home. And here I am today talking to you from my kitchen. My husband's in the other room delivering a history lesson. So we've all got those kind of scenarios happening at home with kids in the other room, flatmates. We're just so aware of what it's like. Our housing and our accommodation matters more than ever. So in 2020, the housing sector proved to be the architecture profession's salvation, providing practice arguably with its only sector sweet spot. Though the housing sector tumbled severely during the first lockdown last March, it bounced back in early July with introduction of the stamp duty holiday. So we saw these figures come through really strongly in RIBA's future trends. So in April, future trends reported a negative workload balance of minus 72. That was a really, really dire reading for the housing sector. But by July, it had recovered by 89 points with a figure of plus 17. And this was a sustained recovery for the housing sector, remaining in positive figures right through to the end of 2020 to December. And All the signs are that despite another lockdown after Christmas, this trend seems to have continued into January. And we've seen at RIBA, for instance, increased demand for RIBA contracts, up almost 30% on this time last year, particularly domestic building and professional service contracts, which seems to indicate to us that architects are not only getting work, but they're getting agreements from clients, which is great news. While an extension to the stamp duty holiday still remains in the balance, with government coming under severe pressure to extend it, the outlook is looking much more upbeat than even a few weeks ago with the successful rollout of the vaccine. It's not only the buoyancy of the property market that's fueling housing design and demand, it's also questions around changing housing needs with the pandemic. And there's been a dramatic shift, has already been apparent in the property market, with many wealthier homeowners moving out of the big cities to less densely populated areas and seeking out bigger homes with gardens amid a shift to working from home and a decline in commuting. What will be the overall impact of these lifestyle changes on the demand for housing in terms of density, and also where it's to be located? Are we going to see a totally different view appear in terms of where demand is away from urban centres? It's all to be seen, really. So never has architects' design and delivery of houses been more important. In this webinar, we'll be highlighting these themes with talks on radical new forms of housing, self-build and community projects, sustainability, and the modular. Our speakers will be discussing projects that range from less than 10 units in a small-scale development to almost 200. Case studies highlight how architects are working innovatively with housing associations and property developers alike, as well as directly in the community with self-build homeowners. Before the break, we'll be kicking off with talks on multi-generational homes and co-living housing solutions. We'll also be looking at the specification of ceiling acoustics without height loss and closing. And we'll be closing just before 10 o'clock with the development of groundbreaking initiative that applies Passivhous standards to social housing. We're going to launch today's session with a talk from Caroline Dove, and she's the author of this book. It's got a fantastic cover. I love this cover of a house in Amsterdam by BATA Architects, which really illustrates many of her points about co-living. It's a wonderful image. Now, Caroline's book explores the planning, technical, financial, health-based and social drivers for multi-generational homes and co-living. And it's richly illustrated with case studies and plans from across the UK, but also from the Netherlands, Germany and Denmark. Written last year, Caroline's book was ahead of the curve. It could not be more relevant now, when the quality of life for all generations during the pandemic has largely been defined by the makeup of our households and how and where we live, with people of all ages experiencing increased levels of isolation and loneliness. Caroline Dove is project director and partner at HTA Design. She's got over 30 years experience collaborating with communities to design sustainable places to live. She leads multidisciplinary teams responsible for designing and delivering a wide range of community-led regeneration and refurbishment projects, multi-generational and later life living, custom building, housing and local authority house building programs. And just before I hand over to Caroline, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that RIBA Books Online is going to be offering a 20% discount on Caroline's book for all delegates to today's webinar, and also to also for the Modular Housing Handbook by her colleagues Simon Bayliss and Rory Bergen at HTA Design. So please look out for the discount code posted in the chat. I think Sharma's going to post that for us. So if you'd like to take advantage of that offer. So I'd like to go ahead and get cracking and welcome Caroline for her talk on radical housing.
Good morning, everyone, and fantastic to see so many people joining this talk. So without more ado, I will get my screen sharing and launch into, oops, there we go, radical housing. So before the pandemic struck across the globe, I'd just completed Radical Housing, which is, as Helen's explained, a book on multi-generational and co-housing. The aim was to go back to roots of homes and communities, rethinking housing, prompted by the housing crisis, and the fact that we're building smaller homes, especially in the UK, and also the fact that more young people are living in their family home because it's almost impossible to find an affordable place to live. 3.4 million, which is 3 times as many young people today as 30 years ago, are living at home with their parents. Living in larger family groups or with non-relatives, sharing resources and sharing in the care of each other isn't new. In fact, it is the nuclear family, which is a recent phenomenon and is one that's exploded. Recent research in Denmark has identified 37 different household groups, all needing different kinds of places to live. In Britain, households where couples share at least one adult were the fastest growing type in the 2 decades to 2019, according to The Economist last December. However, there are many more older people living on their own, often in homes which have become difficult for them to live in and manage. They don't want to move away from the community where they've been living for many years, yet there don't seem to be any choices for right sizing or affordable options for care and support. And numbers look likely to increase in the next decade. Last year was the first year when there were more people over 65 than under 5 in the world. Care for so many more people with health and mobility issues and frailty is a looming concern. Do you have family and friends who are prepared or able to take on this demanding social need? This led to thinking more about multi-generational homes and places to live that can offer more space and opportunity for support, care, and sociability, and are affordable homes. Now, the world has changed and we're thinking differently about how we live, what's important to us. We've all had to rethink what home is and what we need to do there. Is there enough space? Is it adaptable and resilient? We've seen people of all ages isolated, loneliness and mental health issues exacerbated. We've also seen how large, multi-generational families have had a more stressful experience over the last few months if their homes aren't adaptable or spacious. I'd like to talk to you this morning about some of the schemes I've discussed in my book as an introduction to designing more adaptable and flexible homes, the benefits of multi-generational homes and age-friendly places, designing places to be more sociable, supportive and adaptable, enabling communities to flourish. The schemes illustrated here have almost all been built, with a few as yet unrealised projects. And I focused on Europe for my study. I know there are interesting examples of multi-generational and co-living homes in other continents, but I decided to limit my exploration for now to places I could visit easily and ideally by train. Perhaps there's another book to write after a longer train journey. They are built to high sustainability standards. Some are zero carbon or Passivhous. Placemaking and landscape are key to the success of these schemes. Most are affordable, and for the larger schemes, they are mixed tenures. They are all thoughtfully designed with carefully chosen materials and details. Most of all, they are sociable places designed for all generations, with the communities that will live there now and in the future. So as in the book, I've focused on 3 broad typologies: multi-generational houses, multi-generational communities, and co-housing, which is community-led multi-generational collective housing. So what's a multi-generational home? it's a purpose-designed or an adaptable home which has more flexible space for additional family members or others to live comfortably with some independence. Adaptable in the future, able to accommodate disabilities and live-in carers or young adults returning home, more bathrooms and certainly more shower rooms, extra incidental spaces for privacy, home working, hobbies. Some have separate or additional self-contained space. And this illustration here is a competition winning entry that HGA did for the Home of the Future in 2018. And so the book came about because of a competition, and I chaired a panel discussion on the theme of multi-generational living, which was part of an awards evening for the annual competition run by RIBA and Lawboard Europe Limited to seek innovative uses for Sterling board. And in 2017, the theme was designing accommodation for a multi-generational family of 30 square meters maximum as an addition to an existing home. So one of the joint winners was Gilbert Architects, and their proposal is a neat infill between semi-detached houses or a gap in a terrace, making use of extra height for a split-level independent space. And the other winner, Barefoot Architects, thought about using the extra space in suburban back gardens with an independent flatlet. Both are suitable for replicating at scale. At Chobham Manor, PRP have designed a new typology as part of their master plan, part of the regeneration of Stratford following the Olympics. It was developed to meet the specific needs of families where 3 or 4 generations want to live together and make an adaptable and flexible home which can change over time. So this is a 3-bedroom family house, but it has a separate self-contained annex as a 1-bed house connected by a shared courtyard. This works for grandparents and young couples and students returning home and people with disabilities who want to live independently but wish to remain close to the family. And it works well on the corner sites at Chobham Manor, where the annex has its own front door and the homes are close to larger green open spaces. This is the cover of the book, the 3 Generations house. It's in a custom-built neighbourhood on the north side of the River Eye. A rather austere, dark, north-facing aspect of the street belies the light-filled house inside. The architects were keen to make this an energy-efficient place to live, so have minimised heat loss to the north and optimised solar gain from the south, shaded by balconies in summer. It's designed for a family and their children occupying the lower 3 floors and their grandparents on the top 2 floors. A striking yellow stair connects the floors, and there's a lift as well, which makes it adaptable for the future if the grandparents become less mobile. The intermediary floors are also adaptable for grown-up children who may return to live at home. So now moving on to multi-generational communities. All neighbourhoods are or become to some extent multi-generational, but not all are age-friendly. And I'm talking about a place which has a range of homes designed for all ages and homes which are also adaptable to particular needs. There are communal spaces, gardens, allotments, greenhouses, play spaces. They're mixed tenures and mixed typologies, diverse and inclusive. Usually led by housing associations and perhaps jointly with a developer, and they have established a sociable, mixed tenure and multi-generational community through careful design. On the left is a timeless example of a multi-generational community designed by Parker and Unwin for Joseph Runtree's workers at New Earswick in York over 100 years ago. And on the right is a new low-carbon development for Joseph Rowntree at Derwentthorpe, nearby, by Studio Partington. Both are great examples of lifetime homes in lifetime communities. At Buccleuch House, Levitt Bernstein thoughtfully composed truly multi-generational community beside Clapton Pond in Hackney. It's for Hanover Housing Association, providing affordable rent flats for older people with community facilities, and with larger rent and shared ownership flats for the Orthodox Jewish families managed by Agudas Israel Housing Association, and then flats for private sale for Hill, the developer and contractor. This is one of our projects, HGA, at Hannam Hall, a pioneering zero carbon mixed tenure scheme, which is a very popular choice for people wanting a sustainable way of life and also for downsizing or right sizing from larger homes elsewhere. The landscape encourages sociability and interaction. There are greenhouses and allotments, and there are front gardens where residents sit out and meet neighbours passing by. The plans are very adaptable, with bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs and down, giving more flexibility in use as needs change. It has a great sense of place and community, built in the grounds of a Grade 2 listed hall and former hospital site. One of my few London projects is Peter Barber's intricately and ingeniously designed Hannibal Road for families who really want to live in multi-generational and extended family groups. It's set right against the boundary of this estate and adjoining an industrial site. It shares a garden with the rest of the estate. But everyone has plenty of private amenity as well, and dual aspects, and a unique shingle-clad home. This is an illustration of a potential project. Denmark led the way in the 70s with the first modern co-housing developments, sharing childcare and centred around a common house. But this is a very ambitious project for a multi-generational community on a former care home site, which includes care homes and flats for older people, flats for young people, cafes, workshops, courtyard gardens and roof terraces overlooking Sorterdam Lake. And it's due to be completed in 2022, but I'm not sure it's actually getting moving just yet, but it will be fantastic if it does. Finally, co-housing, which is collective formed with an intentional community. So these are community-led design projects and schemes. The facilities are usually shared to make more of resources you don't need every day or wouldn't be able to provide yourself. So there are often laundries, and people like to have communal meals, and there's generally a common house, often guest rooms, people sharing food buying and child and other caring, and also carpooling. They are generally very sustainable. Many are Passivhaus or zero carbon standard. This project is Vrijbocht, also in Amsterdam, a successful multi-generational community with a central courtyard garden, but also a theatre, cafe, nursery and workspaces. So Germany has a strong tradition of multi-generational and co-living. Berlin alone has far more co-living developments than the whole of the UK, which the City Council has facilitated through land and development support for collaborative groups. Ritterstrasse 50 is a simple block with customizable flats which have been adapted and fitted out by each occupant. Generous balconies, narrow but still room for hammocks and plenty of plants. A community room, when we visited it, it had become a temporary home for refugees. A tool room, which is a drum practice room, and lots of cycle parking space. Sprayveld is a vibrant community that led to development on the banks of the River Spray, saved from developers and now a thriving place to live. There are quite a few choices of different flat types. So standard flats, which are the orangey ones, and then what they call cluster flats, which are really quite a small private living space, but much larger shared communal kitchen, dining and living spaces. So everyone also gets a large, generous balcony or terrace, and there are extensive communal spaces, guest rooms, workshops, and workspaces. There have been some pioneering co-housing schemes in Britain, and none more so than the Old Woman's Co-housing at New Ground. It's very age-friendly for older women, 60 to 100 plus. It's been quite a journey for them through many years by a group determined to make a place they wanted to live, and they co-designed it with PTE. The new homes fit into the two-storey street and enclose a richly landscaped courtyard and allotment garden they all share looking after. There's privately owned and social rent, a mix of sizes, and they have a shared communal kitchen and dining space. Another collective endeavour to secure a site select an architect and develop an affordable, sustainable place to live. Again, it took some time to do it, but this is a place where they've succeeded in getting a lot of different communal facilities and share many of the things that you need day to day, such as food buying and their cars, and there are guest rooms for families. Cars are actually kept well out of the scheme, and all the homes are accessed on car-free pathways. It's been simply designed and standardized to keep costs down, but with agreed customizable choices. Space can be a little bit tighter in each home because there are these wonderful shared communal facilities. Everyone gets a small private balcony and generous shared space, including the River Lune frontage. It was important for the group that it was designed to Passivhous standards, and it has its own hydroelectric power from the river. And a pioneering project which has received a lot of attention recently, and also took a concerted effort by the community to get this co-housing scheme off the ground. It's now a thriving multi-generational community organised around a car-free street at the centre. It's a great example of customisation while maintaining balance and order. It knits into the surrounding streets with choices of brick type, and everyone has a choice of internal plans. It's built to exceptionally low Passivhous standards, and the heat pumps are a feature of the front gardens. So just a quick conclusion, and I've had feedback from the new ground, which as a result of going through the last year, they've said, we've not only survived, but managed to thrive during lockdown. And from Marmalade Lane, the common house had to close, but they enjoyed using an outdoor pizza oven instead. So multi-generational communities and co-housing have thrived and survived the pandemic. And making more space for homes, making sociable and thriving communities. There's lots more to read in Radical Housing. And as Helen has said, in How to Build Them, in another book by my two partners, Simon and Rory, on modular housing. And we're delighted the RIBA is making them available on special offer this week. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you so much, Caroline. I know there are some questions in the Q&A for you, so if you'd like to, I'll put a couple of them to you. Right. Your talk, I think, aroused lots of interest here. I can see Sam Goss, for instance, saying great selection of projects, and lots of thank yous coming through there. A question from Bob Eden is, are these imaginative approaches that you presented in the different projects going to be threatened by the MHCLG design guide model, which is being promoted now? Are we heading yet again to a reinforcement of one size fits all suburban semi-detached ideal?
I sincerely hope not, and I'm sure there are many people who will resist that as being the only way. I mean, there need to be many choices for many people. There certainly isn't one size fits all, and I'm hoping that pioneering groups will continue to grow. There are many more groups in Britain, and I do think it needs to come from people. Architects can pioneer and push, but I do think we need our clients and the communities to really speak out and say what they want.
I've got another question here from Erica Takawira, and it picks up on that really. She says, do you think co-living should be considered more instead of the traditional retirement living usually suggested for the ageing population? Could this be a way to freeing up housing stock?
I think that's a fantastic point, and I do think it is. It would be wonderful if it was an easier process to get a co-living scheme together, facilitated as they do in Germany. Some of the stories of people taking 10, 15 years to get a site is just shocking, actually. And I do think the co-living principle, as I've said, that we need to be able to help each other and share spaces. And I think co-living with a multi-generational group is probably better than putting everybody of the same age with the same frailty into a care home. And I believe it's the way that certainly Scandinavian countries are thinking much more that we need sharing with younger people and older people. So yeah, absolutely.
William Luck asks a pertinent question here. A couple of multi-generational schemes with annexes were shown. Did these have restrictive covenants to prevent the annex being individually let?
That I don't know. I think the houses have they've generally been on for sale, and I think people, to some extent, it's people are able to use them as they want. But you're right. It's a good question. I will find out from PRP if there's any restrictions, and I'll pop a message back.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for kicking off today's webinar with such a great presentation. I'm afraid we don't have any more time to ask any more questions of you, but a big thank you. So thank you for that, and I definitely recommend taking a look at Caroline's book. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I've got to unshare. That's.
We're going to move on now to talking about soundproofing. Anyone who's lived in a converted flat or even a purpose-built block for any length of time knows that good insulation from noise is absolutely tantamount. All those late nights being kept awake. Poor soundproofing has an immediate and adverse impact on daily lives and people's well-being. We're lucky enough to have here with us today Ben Hancock. He's Managing Director of Oscar Acoustics. With a background in design himself, Ben is passionate about working with architects to devise the best acoustic solutions. He'll be highlighting how you can achieve high-performing soundproofing the ceilings with minimum height loss. So please welcome Ben.
Hi there. Hi. Can everyone see me? I'm struggling with my Wi-Fi connection at the moment for some reason.
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear, no problem.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Let's share.
That's perfect. Thanks, Ben.
Okay. Good stuff. Hi, I'm Ben Hancock, Managing Director of a family-run company in its 43rd year called Oscar Acoustics. We've been leaders in the manufacturing of acoustic enclosures and then the application of acoustic spray-on finishes for reverberation control over the years. Now we use all this experience to bring to you an exciting range of soundproofing products. But first, a couple of alarming facts. So, noise pollution is a serious problem. The Chief Medical Officer in England, pre-COVID anyway, said it's only second to air pollution in damaging public health, while the World Health Organization, WHO, highlights such issues as tinnitus, sleep disturbance, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, adverse birth outcomes, and cognitive impairment in children. WHO calculates that noise contributes to the loss of 1 million years of life a year in Western Europe alone. You can't always control your exposure to these dangerously high noise levels in your day-to-day life, and not all employers will, not all of you will be lucky enough to have employers that have installed our state-of-the-art acoustic sprays in your workplace to reduce noise and improve sound clarity. But in your own home, this is where you should be able to shut the world out and relax. Sadly for many, living in flats or houses of multiple occupancy, this is not the case, leading to serious impact on the occupant's well-being. It's no wonder that our inquiry rate for soundproofing has gone through the roof since lockdown, with people spending longer in their homes, being subjected to the noise of their neighbours. They're fast becoming less tolerant. Many builders offer soundproofing as a service, but without understanding the principles of acoustics and vibration, basic errors are made, leading to the ceilings doing next to nothing to reduce the noise transfer levels. We're regularly contacted by people who've been burnt by this and understandably nervous. So how does sound travel through floors? Sound travels in two ways: through the air as airborne sound through solid surfaces, and as impact sound. If someone is banging, crashing, jumping, or just talking in the room above you, the vibrations and sound pressure waves generated will travel through the floor and joists, with the vibrations traveling into your ceiling and effectively turning it into a speaker. And how to stop it? There is a number of ways to reduce noise between floors. Removing standard thermal insulation and swapping for well-fitted acoustic insulation is a good start. When using acoustic rock wool slab, improved performance can be achieved by leaving an air gap beneath to help reduce the vibration path into your plasterboard. Or replacing existing standard plasterboard for something like sound block can help a little by adding 1 or 2 dB performance. Impact noise can be reduced by using specialist acoustic flooring systems or acoustic foam or dense carpets. However, there are several reasons why these methods can be impractical or ineffective, not least because they all require access to the floor above. But if you can break the path of vibration with a quality rubber insulated acoustic isolation hanger, effectively creating what is known as a floating ceiling, this is by far the most effective and hassle-free solution. For the ultimate professional grade and cost-effective soundproofing, we invented the Oscar ISO mount. Being an engineering company at heart, when we decide to design a new product for the Oscar Acoustics range, it needs to be significantly better than what is already on the market, solving all current issues. We decided to concentrate on a handful of points, knowing other benefits would follow. So, class-leading acoustic performance, the minimum of ceiling height loss, certified fire performance, height adjustable, allowing for flat ceilings across uneven joists. All work is done from the room below. Fast, economical and simple, clipped together installation, and designed and made in Great Britain, specifically Kent. So this is the ISO mount Type 1, and it was the first in the range of 3. So taking the first point, ISO mount Type 1's acoustic performance comes from being attached to the side of the ceiling joist, but ensuring the vibration path is broken by the rubber block and is therefore not directly contacted to the ceiling channels or the ceiling. A huge amount of R&D went into choosing the perfect grade and shore of this rubber to enable optimum performance. On this image, you can see that with the rubber block in the center of the ISO mount, the ceiling channel is completely isolated from the L bracket on the joist. This is where systems like resilient bar lose valuable performance. They may create a space in which to insert insulation and also give a degree of damping due to their spring, but they are a direct connection of noise and vibration to the new ceiling, meaning it's not truly isolated. They can also be problematic to fit without compromising the performance. For peace and quiet, the isolated ISO mount is the way to go, achieving better than compliance with the British Building Regs approved document E for airborne and impact sound. This image also brings us nicely onto the second point of minimum ceiling height loss. Most systems either fix to the underside of the joist, or their design means that the ceiling channel must run across the joist instead of being neatly tucked up beside it. When it's in its highest position, the ISO mount system loses as little as 5 to 6 millimeters instead of what is commonly at least 40 to 7 lost in height with other systems. This is particularly useful when fitting soundproofing to basement flats or rooms where architectural features prevent height loss. Fire performance is also extremely important in the current climate and is only set to get stricter following the conclusion of Grenfell. When designing the product, I called our competitors' technical departments, and when asked what fire rating their product achieved, all but one stated that the acoustic system did not require a fire rating and was protected by the plasterboard, which did have one. That is simply not correct and a dangerous misconception by some manufacturers and contractors. An acoustic hanger or bar forms part of the ceiling makeup. If the product fails due to heat, the entire ceiling will collapse. As regs get tighter, I can see contractors having to remove non-compliant ceilings. So always insist on having a copy of their fire test report for your records. We're proud to say that our ISO mount system achieved a 90-minute fire rating at BRE in the tested configuration. So for that, please see our website or contact us. Now, I mentioned that being height adjustable was one of our aims. Here you can see it in its highest position, and it can slide up and down the joist. The lowest position for the ISO mount actually achieves a 40mm gap beneath the joist, allowing for plenty of adjustment when trying to create a level ceiling across uneven joists. So waving ceilings screwed to the underside of uneven joists are a thing of the past. For really extreme adjustment, it's possible to locally screw blocks to the underside of the joist where the ISO mounts are required. More good news is that all work can be done to the room below. Acoustic floor systems can be extremely labour intensive as the extra build-up of floor leads to skirting boards and doors and also floors in rooms that don't require the soundproofing, all to be adjusted and levelled. If you're having a dispute with your neighbours, ISO mount also means you can do all the work from the room below without disturbing their fun. Many ISO mount competitors are designed to work only with their proprietary channels, which can add a significant amount of overall build cost. For ease, the ISO mount is designed to be compatible with off-the-shelf channels such as British Gypsum's GL1 or the Gypliner one, although there are many on the market with the same dimensions. This brings the channel cost down to as little as 88p a length for the BG version. And if you run out, they're readily available from most builders' merchants instead of waiting for a top-up order delivery of the proprietary channels. Once the ISO mounts are up, the channels clip quickly into place and require no mechanical fixing at all, making installation very fast. Time is money, of course. The plasterboard is then screwed up to the channels. For optimum performance, most choose 2 layers of plasterboard, staggering the joints. Next on the list, extremely proud of the product, and with the intention of exporting it around the world, it was extremely important to us to ensure it was designed and made in Great Britain, and more specifically in Kent, where we're based. We've been working very closely with the Department of International Trade and plan to do a big global launch the minute the trade issues all calm down.
Thank you, Ben. I'm really keen that we just have a chance for a few questions. Are you finished now?
Very close to it.
Okay.
A few more slides. Will I just finish those off quickly?
Okay.
Yep, sure. Okay. So following on from the popularity and incredible feedback we had on the Type 1, we decided to launch the Type 2 and 3 using the same principles. So the Type 2 is fixed direct to concrete or the plasterboard through into the joist. And uses the same saddle there, and the channel just clips in. That's great for listed buildings where you can't remove plasterboard or feature ceilings. That gives you a 50mm gap there. And there's also drop rods available as well if you need larger voids, and all the kits are available. You also have the Type 3, so this uses the same components and gives you a 100mm void, but with plus or minus adjustment built in. So you fix the L bracket into position, and then the second bracket slides up and down, and then at any time that two of the screws at the side, they line up. So it gives you a millimetre adjustment at a time, and makes laser levelling extremely easy. And that's the range in a nutshell. So all of those are available on our website. So for a peaceful life as a designer, specifier or developer, or even a homeowner, please consider the ISOmount range. So check us out. There's installation videos and animations on our website, and also YouTube channels and all our social media channels. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben, for a really useful presentation there. We've got lots of questions in the chat for you as well about that. For instance, Kristofer Hartis, I'll just take a couple of the questions because we're running out of time.
Sure.
Do you have any solutions for use when the noise source is below instead of above? In this scenario, there is no access to the flat below either. Thank you.
Okay, so the systems you've seen, whilst we're always we're growing the range. So at the moment, you just see soundproof ceiling systems there. You can use we've got a product called Cellbar, which is a recycled paper insulation that's fire treated, and that can be pumped. If you can get down under your floorboards, that can be pumped into the void, and actually will deal with a lot of the airborne noise. So obviously you don't get the impact noise on your ceiling, so actually that's going to be extremely handy.
Thanks so much, Ben. We've got lots of questions here we haven't got time to answer, but is there a way that they can contact you through your website or something like that? Anyone who's got any questions about your products?
Yes, there is. So the email address is mail@oscar-acoustics.co.uk. If you just Google Oscar Acoustics, we come up top, of course. It's a slightly unusual name. But there's, as I say, there's the videos, and I'll try and go through the question and answers section and try and answer a few of the questions on there as well.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation.
Thanks.
We're moving on now to talk about a very different subject. And first of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate our next speaker, because Matt Bridgestock of Gilbert Architects has made the shortlist to this year's Mcewan Award. And if you don't know about the Mcewan Award, it's a very special award because it recognises design for the common good, and we run it annually in the journal. And there's always very hot competition for this award. And the affordable Passivhoos design and build approach that he and his practice have developed was commended by the judges for providing Passivhouse most generally associated with one-off private homes and making it achievable to social housing. I think that's its immense contribution beyond design, really. The focus of the Passivhoos project that he's been leading on has led to improvements of the lives of the occupants, with the elimination of fuel poverty being a key social aim. On completion of Linn Walk, the project that Matt's going to talk about today, it's set to be the largest certified and completed domestic passive house project in Scotland. Matt is director at Gilbert Architects. Current projects include more than 150 homes for affordable rent across Scotland and Northern England. Matt's new initiative, Passivhoos, that he's presenting today, aims to bring passive house standard performance to social housing budgets. I'm going to hand over now to Matt.
Thanks very much, Helen. That's a lovely introduction. That's great. I'm going to talk you through, I've got about 15 minutes, or I've got exactly 15 minutes, perhaps, Helen. I've got about 15 minutes to talk to you about Passivhoos and what we've been trying to do over the last 5 to 7 years. Just a little bit, we're up in Glasgow. It's snowing heavily today, but it might be snowing where you are. We're mostly based in Scotland, there's 16 of us, and about 5 years ago, we decided that we had been doing Passivhaus for a lot of self-build clients, and we decided that what we would do is try and bring it to our social housing work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that process. So why Passivhaus? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons why Passivhaus is a good thing. To be honest, we've been working with some of the Passivhaus principles for the last 15 years, perhaps more, looking at insulation and air tightness and so on. But we've used Passivhaus as a benchmark to try and get to really deliver the performance that we're kind of designing. We're all a little bit geeky, and the idea that we can predict the energy and there's no performance gap at the end of the project is really one of the things that we're really interested in. But obviously there's a whole range of social benefits and also carbon benefits, and trying to get to a low carbon economy. So there's a few of the different things there, and we've been out and sought clients and partners that want to work with us on that, and I'm going to show you some of the projects that have resulted from it. I'm not going to explain Passivhaus. There's plenty of very good resources on the web to explain about Passivhaus. It's really quite simple in that it's around insulation and air tightness, keeping the energy in, getting as much energy from solar gain, but making sure that you don't overheat it in the summer. And also 15 minutes is not enough. If anyone is really keen, then as I say, there's other resources on the web, and I'll give you a link to some videos later. We've also, it's not just about the design, we've also looked at how we embed it into our plan of work and how we take it through all of the projects in the practice. So even the projects that are not aiming for Passivhaus certification have some degree of, the process has changed, the detailing, the consideration, the modeling has changed within the practice. So even though 16 of us, there's now 6 of the staff that are certified Passivhaus designers, which means that it spans out into the whole practice. The other interesting thing, and you'll see at the end here in number 7, is monitoring and in use. We're now monitoring most of our projects that we design in the practice, so that feedback from projects, from clients, client stock and so on is all feeding into our design. So actually our plan of work has changed very much to kind of an evidence-led process for detailing and design and so on. Cost, well, at the beginning of all this, 2012, 2015, the capital cost of a house in Scotland being built to Passivhaus was possibly between 25 and 30% above normal, typical building regs, whatever you want to call that. Where we've bought it over the last 5 years, we're somewhere between 5 and 8% above building regulations. We've got the Section 7 sustainability targets in Scotland as well. So we've also got gold standard, which is now the minimum in Glasgow. So we're not too far away from being the same price as the gold standard, which is pretty good. But what that gets our clients over time, and you'll see the lifetime cost over on the right-hand side there is obviously the lifetime cost with the, if you take into account the fuel and maintenance, is significantly lower, even though the capital cost is higher. So from a cost point of view, it's looking pretty good. What we've been trying to do, though, is bring that capital cost down to within the Scottish Government social housing funding limits. And so we've been working with a local contractor, with Stewart and Shields, to try and bring some cost certainty into that. And that means we've set up a design and build initiative, so we can get the cost certainty earlier, get the details right early on, and bring that into social housing. So here's some of the things we've got. We've now got an R&D program with directly with the contractor. So someone who works between us and the contractor to try and refine the details and the program, good collaboration, cost certainty, as I say, a robust design, improved performance. We're looking at a dedicated supply chain for some of the key items such as MVHR, such as windows, such as the timber kit, and that helps us improve the sequencing. Last year, we got a 3-year knowledge transfer partnership funded by Innovate UK. The reason I put this up is that this is our second knowledge transfer partnership. And I would strongly advise any architects that are listening to this to consider knowledge transfer partnership of a way of really increasing and driving research and development in your practice. It's a brilliant tool. And if you search for it online, I'm quite sure there is someone local to you that will tell you all about it. But knowledge transfer partnerships and teaming up with academics and contractors has really changed our practice, which is really good. So I'm going to now just do some nice pictures of our Passivhous projects, talk a wee bit about them, each one of them, including the Garelochead example. But if you're really interested, then we've got a Vimeo channel and we've got some videos of these projects, some of the completed ones and some of the projects in progress, so you can see a bit more detail about them if you're interested. I think Helen or Stuart or Charmaine is also going to put that in that link in the chat if you want. So. Right, I'll go through a few projects if that's all right, and we've got 5 minutes or whatever to go through this. So the first project we've got here was for Shuttleston Housing Association. In the picture, the church on the left-hand side of the image had lain derelict for around 10 to 15 years, and the Housing Association bought that, and with Page and Park designed new flats to go in that. Page and Park also designed the tower on the right-hand side, but Stewart and Shields won the bid and decided that they would propose to Shuttleston Housing Association that we made the tower Passivhous. So we got involved at that stage. So the project was technically on site when we got involved to make the tower on the right-hand side Passivhous, which was an incredibly stressful process. I wouldn't recommend that process to anyone, but incredibly rewarding. So we've got 5 flats to Passivhous. The ground floor is steel, the upper floor is a timber frame. They achieved an average air tightness of 0.5 air changes. The houses are all now let to older, over 55s and older, people. It's got a lift, so the housing associations has dedicated them for older people. And we had, before COVID, we had 3 months of post-occupancy monitoring, which we registered. We looked at the difference between the building regs flats in the church and the Passivhouse flats. So we've got a substantial reduction in gas use between the flats, which is excellent. We also got high levels of satisfaction from the Passivhouse flats. But unfortunately, COVID has prevented us in Scotland going in and putting a lot more monitors in and doing the work that we need. So we're hoping to finish that after the pandemic at some point, maybe next year. But that's really the first project that was part of this Passivhoos collaboration. Next project is down in the Borders, which is for Eildon Housing Association. This is 3 houses, mainstream rent. It's in a conservation area in Newton St Boswells, which is a lovely little village. It's just around the corner from the school. This is all based on Housing Association grant. We've got an air tightness of 0.35 and it's timber kit. It's all pretty, aside from, we used I-joist system for the kit. Aside from that, it's all pretty standard kind of building materials. And that was the first Passivhoos model house that we finished. We've then moved on. Again, you'll see a very similar form to St Boswells, being built at the same time. 3 houses down in Dumfries and Galloway. Interestingly, a lot of our clients are looking at rural fuel poverty because obviously a lot of rural houses are on electric systems and the cost of electric has gone up significantly. So the idea of these being all electric houses but being really cheap to run is great. The other thing about Closeburn is we interviewed the tenants. The tenants didn't put their heating on. None of the 3 tenants in here put their heating on until November. I presume they've got the heating on today, but yeah, they didn't put the heating on until November, and they're all really comfortable and really excited to be in their new houses. They were finished during the pandemic, which was an interesting process. They've also been developed by a community development trust, which has built these and owned these, and then will be renting them out on an affordable basis to meet the local needs. This is Linn Walk. This is Garelochead. I would like to have had more photos of this. It was scheduled to be finished 2 weeks ago, but the pandemic and the various issues around all of that and supply, particularly with the lockdown here in Scotland that has lasted since October, in this area, I mean, it isn't finished, and I haven't been to site in the last few weeks to take some photos. So this is what it will be, is 10 flats and houses, including some bungalows. It's all going to be for social rent for Argyll Community Housing Association. It's actually just getting its final air test this week, I think. So I haven't got an air tightness test figure for that, but it's due for completion very, very shortly. And we're just about to go on site with another project of a similar size in West Strother on the other side of the country in the Scottish borders, again for Eildon Housing Association, so that's good. That was meant to start on site just after Christmas, but we hope to be on site before the end of March now. And a little bit further south, we're just got a project in Lancaster, very close to one of the projects that Caroline talked about, and in fact is involving similar people that the Lancaster co-housing project had involved. Loon Valley Community Land Trust and South Lakes Housing. We're doing 20 houses and flats for them for a mixture of social housing and social rent and shared ownership, which is going to be very good. Again, that's timber frame. And again, up in Braemar, you might, I don't know whether the temperatures of Braemar make a difference to you, but it's the coldest place in Scotland so far this year, -15 last night. So we're doing 15 houses and flats, again, for the Community Development Trust up there. And that's expected to be on site either the end of this year or beginning of next year. And very finally, we're just looking at some bigger projects now and moving on to kind of bring this into the bigger scale. This is in Clydebank, and we're in the early stages of looking at 70 flats for social rent on a brownfield site in Clydebank. So taking that, those techniques and those learnings and taking them further, and again through the Passivhoos collaboration. Oh, go skip over that. So that's a little bit about Passivhoos. We were delighted to be shortlisted for the Mcewan Award. It's really, the whole practice was really excited about that. So there's a couple of links there. If you want to know any more, by all means, get in touch. And thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has at the moment or later on.
Thank you, Matt, for a fantastic talk and really demonstrating how research can be rolled out into built form. And it's very exciting to see you really taking that from a small number of units and rolling it right up and upscaling it. We've got some questions, quick questions I'm going to ask you if you can take here. I think the first one I think we've got here is lots of things. We were asked, I think Alan Crawford had a question about orientation here and the effect, if you can't reorientate, that it has on Passivhouse.
Yeah, so we have been looking quite closely at that. So there's two ways you can certify a passive house, either on heat load or heat demand, and I get them muddled up. But 15 kilowatts per square meter per year is the heat load, and the 10 watts a square meter is the heat demand. Now that's important because the 15 kilowatts, in order to reach that, you need a degree of solar gain in order to balance the heat loss and heat gains up. But the heat demand, the 10 watts a square meter is just simply how good the performance of the fabric is. So actually we mostly certify on the 10 watts kind of thing, which has got less sensitivity about the orientation of it. And it's more about the insulation and the air tightness than the 15 kilowatts per square meter, if that makes sense. So St Boswell's and Closeburn are opposites. The front of Closeburn is north facing and the front of St Boswell's is south facing. So we've changed the window shapes for that to balance it all up. So there's the same amount of glass on both of them, but Closeburn has got more of the glass on the back and St Boswell's have got more of the glass on the front. So that's the kind of financial model and the energy model kind of worked out. And then we've looked at how we then certify it to enable those types to change their orientation slightly, but not impact on the certification. So yeah, that is an issue. And you know, there are some places that's become quite an issue. And Linn Walk in Garelochead, the main issue for us was around the orientation of the bungalows wasn't very good, and they're bungalows. So actually they have got a significantly increased building fabric in order to offset the fact that we haven't got the solar gain that in an ideal world we would have. But planning and all the other issues that come onto site layout kind of dictated where they had to be. So that was a bit of an issue.
I'm going to just take one more question from Gabriela Garcia for you. How do you balance passive house principles of good tightness with fresh air ventilation?
Oh, well, Gabriela, there's plenty of videos about the mechanical ventilation system, which is part of any passive house project. There is a lot of research about the air quality that gives you inside a house or school or office. And the monitoring that we've done says that the air quality in a passive house is much better than the air quality in a non-passive house, naturally ventilated house. Now, I could spend the next half an hour talking about this. I don't think I should, because everyone wants a cup of tea. But what I would say is that I think the air quality in the thing for us around all that is then you've got a mechanical system providing ventilation. So the trick with social housing is, how do you get in to maintain that? How do the residents deal with that? How does the association deal with that? And as you can see from the photo here, the one in the middle, that's Barbara, involved in the commissioning of an MVHR unit in a set of flats. And so things like we're putting in flats, we put the MVHR unit in the stairwell, sorry, the close is Scottish, in the stairwell, so they're easy to access rather than actually in the flats and things like that. So we've got a whole strategy around the ventilation. And as I say, if you look on the on our website or on the videos, there's quite a few videos that explain different bits of that.
Brilliant, Matt. I think people could ask you questions all day. This is really groundbreaking work that you've undertaken with Passive House. As Matt said, we're going to have a break now. We are running behind, so I am going to ask everyone to return to us at in 5 minutes. So that is going to be at 10:17. Please don't turn off. Just go away, stretch your legs, turn the kettle on, but stay with us. So look forward to seeing you again at 10:17.
Hi, Jonathan Stewart here. Did you hang up and join?
No, I haven't. Do you want me to leave?
Yeah, if you just want to reconnect and then we'll...
Okay, right, yeah, I'll leave.
Cool, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Jonathan. That's great. It sounds like your audio is a lot better as well. Just to be sure, I'll drive your slides from my end. So if you just, when you come on screen, I'll share your slides and you can just prompt me to move on.
Okay, so I'll just say sort of next slide.
Yeah, you know, things like and moving on, blah blah blah. Anything
okay,
like that. I'll be here listening.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it as it is. Like, okay.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Okay. See you later.
See you in a moment.
Welcome back to the PiP seminar on housing. In this second section of the webinar, it's going to be even more packed and wide-ranging than the first. We're going to take in a beautifully designed private housing scheme in West London, a self-build community initiative near Oldham in Greater Manchester, and a large-scale estate regeneration near Maidstone in Kent. We're also going to have talks from product manufacturers that highlight the importance of the contribution of materials in housing, with a particular onus on zinc and brick. So our first speaker is going to be Kristofer Adelaide. I'm just checking that he's with us. Hi, Kristofer. Great to have you with us today. Successful housing, particularly in London and the South East, is often about infill and gaining planning consents in suburban or conservation areas. This is what our next speaker and his recently formed practice, Kristofer Adelaide Architecture, or AKAA, is proving adept at. Having only set up his practice 4 years ago in Southwark, Kristofer is currently completing a 9-unit housing scheme on a very difficult site in Hanwell in West London. just off the Uxbridge Road. He's here to discuss this and his A.F.R.O modular house concept, which was shortlisted by Brick in 2020 for a housing infill project in Croydon. A signatory of both the RIBA 2030 Climate Challenge and Architects Declare, KAA incorporates sustainability into all its work, and Kristofer is an active member of RIBA, London Architects Group and the Paradigm Network, promoting BAME representation in the built environment. Thank you for joining us today, Kristofer.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen 1 second. Can everybody see that? Hi everyone, thank you very much. Today I'm going to speak about the two projects, but firstly, this is the small K team. Fortunately, we have to be in different locations, so they're not here, but our office is based in Southwark, Iliffe Yard, which is a Victorian styled work-live unit, which is very inspiring to work into. And I just wanted to bring this image up. Of course, there's potentially over 1,000 people in this crowd, and my first time I ever got a chance to be in front of that many people was when I did my debut as a singer in Berlin, Moor Park, where there's an amphitheatre, and it just shows one guy can build lots of following through karaoke, which led to, of course, Construction Rocks with Land Aid, which is the construction industry's charity trying to end youth homelessness, and KLH UK kind of invited me to be part of their band, and over the 5 years between 2016 and 2019, where we're allowed to go on stage, we've raised over £10,000, and I feel that charity like Starts at Home, it's very important that we give back, and hopefully we'll eradicate homelessness in the next few years, but that's through housing and good quality housing for all. The reason I've called this Bespoke is because the site that I'm going to speak about, which is in Hanwell, is one of these kind of long, thin sites that a client found, and of course was interested in, well, developer mindset. They have to build a certain number to be able to, you know, achieve certain goals in terms of costs and so forth. The site basically is on a very tight, long, 65-metre long site by 9 metres wide frontage, and this was the existing building. Located in Hanwell, and it's quite interesting because my mum lives around the corner, so I know it very, very well. And it, you know, it's one of these buildings that you saw every day. It was an RSPCA category, and of course there was, because of this Victorian nature, the locals had a very good connection to it, but it wasn't fit for what the client wanted, and it was very difficult to come to the assumption that we may have to knock it down because to extend it was not going to give it what we wanted. We went through 1.5 years of design and planning, and you know, it was to and fro with the planners to get the right building, which I think is an interesting kind of way of working, because you know, the planners know the area a lot better than us. They know their community, and they've got links with the councillors and everyone else. And so to bring something that would offer you know, an interesting and you know, adequate building for the location where there's a kind of range of different things going on. So this is the site. You can see the length of it, the 65-metre wide category, and around it, it's got neighbours, and on top we've got a convent with 12 nuns. The site itself is kind of very north-south. The existing building was over 2 stories. It actually did have planning when I was introduced to it for a basement flat and a 4-bed house above. And it was just how does this work that you give the garden back? But it gave confidence to the developer that as a first project for our practice, if it didn't work out, they could actually build out what was already there for the planning. When we started looking at what kind of architecture we could put in, we did a research of the whole local area to try and find if there was an architecture that was leading the location. But of course, the Uxbridge Road, if anybody knows it, is a long road all the way from Holland Park, goes into London, and all the way to Uxbridge. Up on this road, there's a lot of different things going on, and there's not actual style determined. So we were kind of open to bringing something new to the site. The existing building, as you can see, very much long. We had a private road next door, which was an advantage to us in terms of putting windows on one of the other elevations. And then we, of course, have the two different kind of architecture styles. To your left, the 1900s kind of, you know, Victorian methodology, and then to the left, which is locally listed, supposedly, convent, which is more square and kind of more 1980s kind of style. So the client asked me, sorry, what can we put on this site? And I said, oh, I think 6. And he said, no, we need 9. So we basically had to get to the drawing board and start thinking how we can fit on this tight site building or buildings to accommodate for 9 units. So we looked at the orientation, we looked at, you know, the height and everything, and we went into pre-app with lots of ideas, throwing everything at it, basements, you know, height and everything. And we came out with a great load of information that the planners would agree and accept. One was height, which was really good, but the second was having 2 blocks. We got rid of the basements due to the expense of it, but what we got out of it was that because of its location, located about 5 minutes, walk from what will be the Crossrail, which should have been finished a few years ago, was, you know, adequate, and bus routes and so forth, that we didn't need parking. So it was encouraged for it to be a kind of no parking zone, which is great also to reduce the number of cars and to promote using public transport. This thin long site, as you can see, and to achieve our 9 units, we had to be kind of clever with the spaces. So from ground floor to the 3rd floor is the first block, and then the second block to the rear is a ground floor to 2nd floor. And then you may ask, with distances, so we kind of, you know, ensured that we were speaking to the right people at the start, and the rear building sprinkled, which gave us extra length to be able to achieve this kind of design. And it was encouraged to sprinkle at the building. Then you can see, in terms of planning, we took more reference from the convent side than we did from the Victorian side. Now, this is not really saying that we didn't like the Victorian side. We took out the kind of, you know, lintel designs and so forth. But to achieve more square meterage, it was easier to be flat. But what we did is we kind of lined the buildings at the frontages were the same. And this is a bit deceiving, because when you start looking at elevations, because it's so flat, it tends to say, oh my gosh, it's quite big. But as a perspective and looking at it from the road, the step backs make it feel smaller. So anyway, during the 2 pre-apps that we did with the planners, we tried to bribe them. We didn't bribe them, that's not real. But we did send them some postcards once we did the application, so they could have these on their desks. They can always refer back to it to feel that the building wasn't so heavy on the ground. We used extended large windows for the amount of light that could come into the spaces, but they're slightly set back so that we can have a bit of shading when the sun was to hit the windows, so not to cause too much overheating. And as you can see, the front of the building looks actually like a 3-story instead of a 4-story, looking at it in the perspective. So we kind of related that back to the Victorian building to the left. And this is standing in the gardens of the nunnery, or the area where the nuns live, and looking back. And because we couldn't have this wall doing anything, we thought if we gave it some relief, it wouldn't be just a flat wall. So when we got planning, the client had to go and sell this to the investors. We created some imagery to try and show what our, the finished product would look like. And as you can see, we wanted it to be very light because of the size of the building was like using light brick, light stonework, and light window framing. We could lighten the weight of the building. And as you can see, the postcards to the reality, we tried to, to this render, we tried to keep the idea of the step backs and achieving kind of stopping the overlooking by these steps. And also, one good thing is the second block, no one would ever build in front of you because we're standing in the cemetery. This was kind of a big deal for Kristofer Adelaide Architecture when we got the demolition commenced and only the stairs were left. I think there was a gas pipe below it. I thought this was a timely moment to go and do some, photo specials for the practice. At that time, there was only myself and one of my colleagues, Phil Davis, came to join me to help me deliver this building. And here's the troops that helped us build it, Marengo Projects and Mountbatten Homes, and Oliver Connell, which is a huge concrete framing company that builds spaces like Gatwick Airport and so forth. But they were building a project down the road. And they thought, well, we can do this. And of course, they had all the tools, so it was really good that they could come and help us to put this together. Once concrete goes into the ground, that's it, and we were very aware. So this was kind of a very scary moment for us. We looked at lots of different structural methods. So we did look at CLT, we looked at timber frame, and we looked at metal frame. But due to the site constraints, we thought that concrete would be the easiest to get the machinery in and build the blocks in, the B block first and then the block A second, so that we were moving in and out and could get trucks in, because it's on the main Uxbridge Road. We couldn't stop trucks on the road. It was also on a crossing. So with all these difficulties that we had to start thinking about. One thing I want to comment on is the diversity of our team. The structural engineer at Moore Structures, apprentices, and myself shows great diversity that architecture is going towards, and it's really good to work in these teams. Once you start seeing structure going up, you get very excited. So our weekly site visits, when we first went in, this was the first, third view. You can see block B at the back's nearly complete, and then there was. I've taken this image just to kind of express something where, you're in a graveyard where people go down, and then across it, you get this building that's started to come out of the ground. And it was just amazing to see this, and did we put the columns in the right place? Is there going to be a clash with the windows? All these things start going through your mind. And I guess this is the same thing that you do when you're building projects. Looking at material, of course, this is a product in practice presentation. We did want the material to be brick. It's a beautiful material, lightweight, so the building felt like it was floating in between the other two buildings. And we, it's next to two churches, and in respect, Hanwell is a beautiful place. It's up and coming. It's in the sense of getting more residential units. It's quite an old town, so anything new, is contentious. But this building in the distance is a church that it's called the St. Joseph and Our Lady of St. Joseph's Church, which was actually rebuilt in the 1960s. And it was just saying that, you can do contemporary and it can be lasting, and it can make a community, because now you see this building, you never forget it. And also the inspiration came over from the graveyard next door. It's a listed Westminster graveyard based in Hanwell. And just looking at the materials that were there, they've lasted the test of time, and you could see the colors of the bricks and the stone, and we thought, actually, there's something quite good here, that the mix really works. So we decided to take upon some of those interests, and because the windows are not all in the same place, and we've got step back, brick dimming became part of my everyday kind of ordeal, just making sure things were in the right place, and working to give the developers the right information. And then we did a lot of studies in terms of what the material should be, the stone lintels, the mortar, the bricks, and that it was this light building. So we started doing these renders early on to kind of give the comfort to the client. And then we got some materials in to just test them next to each other. It's always best to get samples and understand these samples next to each other, because, one bit of mortar change can be a lot of a different building, as you can see in these two examples. We actually went for a color in between these two, but you can see that on the left it would have been a much heavier building, to the right would have been way too light. So we went for something which is a little bit in between. When I went to site, I saw the drawings on the table, and I think, as a small practice, this is doing a building that was actually quite sizable and being so small. For us, it was beautiful to see the drawings on the table and that they were being followed. And there's this aspect that developers are this, that, the other, but actually working with them and getting the right product is it's a satisfaction that just cannot be explained. Sometimes you're not going to get all you want in your building, and it has to be affordable in both sides. But if you work really hard together, you will be able to get good results. This image is very interesting. It was the topping out ceremony, and we started the brickwork. And you can see, this is the mum of the client, and it was important that she blessed the building. And I think it's an amazing thing to bring in family when you work. This organization of building is very stressful. So having your family around you, it's an amazing thing. And yes, and this is some of the details with it nearly complete. This building is not complete, but you can start to see it going up and how it reflects back, the step backs, how it reflects to the building next door, which is the nun's house. And the great thing with the nun's house is that there's no windows onto that elevation that faces the building. So we're able to put larger windows to look out on that elevation. This is it still in progress. And I just can, I'm going to run through a few images just showing how the color of this building just really shines at different times of the day. So this is the western elevation taking the sun, which means the orientation, the aspects, there's triple, dual, but every unit is a dual aspect unit. Every unit gets sun during the day at some point. So it makes actually living in these spaces really interesting and very, very nice. And this is another time of the day, probably about 12 in the afternoon, and you can see how the sun glistens, and it's in the graveyard. So you're looking over, and there's something peaceful about being there. And this is looking over the fence, and it just kind of like this rising little building, well, not little, the rising building out of the ground. But we've tried to keep it light, and you can see this again from standing in the convent. In the graveyard going in. You can see it in the distance, and again, it just doesn't feel too obstructive in the visuals. These are some of the products we use. I just sort of named, it's always the teams you work with that make things happen. And this is just to name a few. I can share these names later if anybody wants them. And I just wanted to bring also effectively come back to the idea of modular, which is becoming very important in building terms in today's world. There's lots of investment into the idea of modular, but there's also a kind of perception that maybe it's not necessarily the right thing to do. But there is housing shortage, as we speak about every day. Nobody doesn't know about this, and how do we deal with this? And one of the things in the office is that we started thinking about and looking at a concept house, and we did get shortlisted with the Brick by Brick Housing for a Better World competition, and also Hub and Archiboo. We presented to them with some great other architects who showed other kinds of housing. But we've been really pushing it and thinking, like, could we create a product, and then a product that could, one, reduce costs of housing, but also be beautiful. So A.F.R.O stands for Architecture for the Reasonably Ordinary. And it's a house concept, but we want to build that up to be, communities and beyond this. And it's kind of like a product that can be put in a factory, and there's factories being built everywhere, and potentially that they can use the system to start building houses that reflect the people that live in it. And we want them to be beautiful, but the case with modular, sometimes you start to see bars in, and we have to be less kind of creative. So we try to create something different, and these elevations that you see will be kind of, I won't say clipped on, we're still working on the detail, but they will give a different aspect. And then the front, which we're calling the biscuit elevation, will kind of be able to be kind of applied to different modular types. And modular is something, I'll just mention a few names. There's the Offsite Alliance, and there's other people involved, and they're sharing information. So we're getting the knowledge that's been already known. So some of these modules have to fit on the back of a lorry. So we know that we're capable of bringing them to be in different locations within the UK. And our position is, like, how do you make the modular beautiful? We're looking for the idea of affordable, but everybody should have an element of beauty in where they live. So if we create a chassis which is repeatable, and you can press a button to make that, so the interiors and everything can be designed to that detail. The externals can be repeated because we've used the same chassis. So within a community, you could have several similar or different. So if we look at the Victorian street or the Edwardian street, there's just this kind of regular building, but with different aspects to it. But we love this idea of stone. We've used that in the St. Mary's Mews, so we're trying to speak to the suppliers again to see if there's something we can create that can be an off-site repeated product, and through repetition we can bring down the cost, that then we can build off one blueprint several different buildings. These are just some other examples if you were going to look to try to make some different types of elevational treatments, but they would be on our biscuit facade system that then gets proposed onto this elevation. And of course, when you're building communities, you could have terraces, semi-detached, or if you needed to go for more, because they're based on quite a kind of very tight floor plan. If you need more rooms, you just go up. Value in the air is available. This gives you a bit of an idea of how the product's broken up. I've been working very closely with colleagues in the office, as James, Nathaniel, and Ade Kunle, and we've been looking at this and just how we can put this house together. And this shows you the different types of modules. There's 3 modular bits here: the ground, the first, and the roof. They'll come on the back of lorry, and then we would apply our elevations to this, and they'd be airtight, ready to go. So we could even leave them for a while before the elevations get put on. This just shows you a bit of the breakdown through floor plans, that we could create different types of floor plans by moving walls, giving clients the opportunity to create spaces, especially now where we have to be in different rooms. How can you cut out the noise and break up spaces, putting offices in bedrooms, or kind of living room partition walls. And how great would it be one day if your house could be delivered like this? You make all you concept it, and then you drop it in place. There are things in the world that have been doing like this, and there's some really great people out there who already started this. And I think it's time that architects can get involved, and really pack a punch in terms of the designs that they start making. I wanted to put this up because the idea is always, if we're building a house, we're actually building communities. Your neighbor might be somebody new that you meet, but I think the front door should always be equal, be it social housing, private purchases, or even for others. It shouldn't be that your front door differentiates you from the community. And I think by having a community that relies on similarities, it means that you can reduce the kind of definition of what social is, because we tend to think social is like the lowest when we speak about it in lots of different grades. But I think we need to redefine social, because as architects, even younger architects and younger people, we possibly can't afford to live in a house. And if you look at the models everywhere else, rental is a big thing. So maybe this could be a rental model that would kind of redefine and readjust where we stand. And especially now we're spending more time at home, we could meet our neighbors, and things like gardens and the Garden Cities movement idea, backing gardens together and having fields to play in, becomes more relevant. This image here just shows a bit of the Victorian street.
I hate to stop you, because your enthusiasm is just contagious, and I think there's been a huge amount of admiration in the chat as well for your Mews scheme, both because it's so artful in this on the use of the site. So, but I really want to take the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
And the first one comes from someone in the chat, and I think it's really, really relevant for the moment. Obviously, you're a fairly newly formed practice, and they wanted to know how you met the client for the Mews project and got that commission.
So it's actually, I won't go through the full story because, again, I'll have to keep you here for a while. But we knew each other from before. So I used to work, during my studies, I had to work for a very well-known burger brand. And the client who owned that franchise sent his son to work with me. And we got on really well. And then he basically started an estate agency and started looking into doing developments. And then we started talking. I was like, oh, well, I'm an architect. And I was like, well, let's meet. And, we presented our thought process instead of saying, you can build like this and that, and wanted to be friends really and discuss architecture. And then started inviting him to different projects that I liked. And then he was like, well, let's give it a go. He didn't think it was risk-free, but there was planning on the site. So it made it less risky that a new architect as myself. So we both started the journey together really, and we've been working together on other projects since. And it's like to start, we were talking at 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was just building a relationship. I think we're relationship builders first, and then architects that can help make that relationship.
That's a great point. That's a great point. The other thing I wanted to ask you, this is my own question, is really where you got your inspiration from, because to me, it really reminds me of some of the low-rise, high-density projects from Camden School, the sort of step up and everything. I've kind of loved the form. I wondered what your references were and for the Mews project.
Well, I have to say, at the time, I was really kind of obsessed with developers and Roger Zogolovich had been building some houses and some buildings, and there was lots of them with step backs, and I got to invite the client with me to go and see his Shepherdess Walk project, and there was lots of steps going on because their whole definition is like stepping up, stepping down, and we thought, oh, we could potentially put some of this enthusiasm into the building, which was a bit more difficult due to our site, but that was my inspiration, the idea that you know, you could be able to connect like different rooms and different views, so you can stand on the top and speak to your neighbor at the bottom, that kind of thing, so that it connects you to your neighbors. So it was really going to see some of these projects, and then there's another project by AHMM that's in London Bridge that was built, and that was built, you know, prior to ours or at the same time, but you know, there was inspiration in that as well. So yeah, very excited. The solid space kind of.
Oh, thank you so much, Kristofer. It's just been a pleasure meeting you and also seeing your projects, and the pure love that has gone into that Mews building. I could just feel it, and all the choice of materials. It's just fantastic. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
As demonstrated by Kristofer's Mews project, with its really beautiful use of brick, the choice of materials enrich not only the overall quality and character of a project, but also essential to placemaking in housing, creating connections with an existing context. Our next speakers, VM Zinc, specialise in the manufacture of a wide range of titanium zinc products and systems, including cladding, roofing, rainwater systems and ornaments, working closely with specifiers from concept design stage through to the finished building. Here, Operational Marketing Manager Jonathan Lowry is going to describe how they're working with architects on a wide range of residential buildings internationally. So I'm going to hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Helen, and good morning, everybody. Zinc's got quite a long history, and I'm going to give a brief overview from Paris, the boulevards of Paris, to the shipyards on the Tyne. Now, a lot of Parisian roofs have zinc, and a lot of those roofs are over residential buildings and have been for almost 200 years. Some of the buildings have gone from being servants' quarters to offices to lofts, but the zinc is still there. So moving on to the next slide, we're actually the zinc roofs of Paris and the people, the skilled installers that fit them, are being submitted for UNESCO World Heritage status next month. So hopefully the roofs of Paris will actually be part of UNESCO World Heritage. Moving on though, a little bit further forward to the 21st century. This is actually a zinc clad building, a house in Northern Ireland, which was the RIBA House of the Year in 2019 by McConaughey and McGrath Architects. And here pre-patinated quartz zinc has been used to clad not only the walls, but also the roofs and all the rainwater systems as well. And on the next slide, we're going to see something not entirely dissimilar. Again, standing seam, roofing and cladding, but this time in pigmento red. So it's the same zinc, but with a mineral pigment that gives this delicate color. And here, this is in Holland, where Mark Architects have created an extension to this old early 20th century building with a thatch roof. And Kristofer in the last presentation talked about materiality, and zinc works well by itself, but it's more commonly mixed with other materials. And here you can see the glazing, the brick, and indeed the thatch. And coming back to the UK on the next slide, we'll see a project actually in Berkshire. This is not pigmento red, but pigmento brown this time, with a slight brown pigment. Again, standing seam, roofing and cladding. And on the slide on the right, you can see how flexible zinc is. All the all the trim, the gutters, the fascias are all made from the same material. So you don't need to use a different material for the detailing. The whole roof, the whole wall, and all the detailing can be made from the same material. Next slide. What is important is the build-up. Traditionally, as you can see on the top left-hand corner, zinc roofing is fitted onto timber boarding, quite commonly plywood, and vented. And this works extremely well and is still done. But what's been used more and more for various reasons are warm, non-vented roofs. There's an air tightness, which we've heard about earlier this morning, and far fewer thermal bridges. And it's also possible to create a roof which uses only A1 or A2 non-combustible or limited combustibility materials, which is obviously more and more critical. By combining zinc, which is either A1 or A2, depending on the finish, with a non-combustible insulation and a steel deck, you can have a build-up which is not only a non-vented warm roof, but also completely non-combustible, or A1 or A2. Next slide, please. We've seen zinc is used in standing seam, but this is a Matthew Lloyd project in Clerkenwell where zinc's been used to create shingles. Shingles are generally used on the walls, but here you can use them on a steep roof. And again, all the trim around the windows is zinc. And this is an Edwardian housing area of London, and the zinc and the ceramic brick really combines nicely in this social housing, which was built a couple of years ago. The next slide. Here, this is again public housing, social housing, but this time back in Paris. Different type of architecture, different type of zinc as well. This is engraved Azingar, which has a slight texture to it. It's got a matteness to it, but also a brightness to it, as you can see on this slide. And here, the standing seam's been used, but also flat lock panels and even sine wave corrugated zinc. And on the next slide, we'll see that again, wall build-ups are very, very important. The vast majority of zinc is put on a ventilated wall, and the timber, as you can see on the right, can be replaced with a steel deck, again meaning that you have a non-combustible or limited combustible wall. You'll include intumescent horizontal fire barriers. On the left, you've got a rain screen zinc system, again on cladding rails, so no combustible materials. Moving forwards, this is a residential block, a very different type of architecture in Spain, again using the Pigmento pre-weathered green zinc this time, and the flat lock. So it's the same basic principle as on the project in Clerkenwell by Matthew Lloyd Architects, but here the shingles or the flat lock panels are rectangular, but the principle is basically the same. Next slide. And this, back in London, Scott Brown Rig, Project Vista, which is between the Battersea Power Station site and Battersea Park. Here, Pigmento red, so the zinc with the red pigment has been used on this block. And these are interlocking rain screen panels. Next slide. Not dissimilar, but this is the other side of the Atlantic in New York by Shop Architects, where natural zinc has been used. Natural zinc can be used. It doesn't have to be pre-patinated, but natural zinc will change over time. It will lose its shine and create a patina, which will take time to become completely even. But these panels are actually perforated to create further texture. And on the left, you can see a plinth in copper. Zinc above copper is fine. Copper above zinc wouldn't work. Zinc is compatible with lots of materials and metals, but not everything. So if you are going to be using zinc with other materials, one that could drain onto another, just speak to us to make sure that it will work. Moving on. This is using some brick, which is maybe not dissimilar to the project in Hanwell. This is in southwest London, and here standing seam roofing panels with a light brick and glazing units. As we've seen, zinc is sometimes used for the complete roof and facade, but more commonly it's combining with other materials. And then on to the next slide. Zinc, as you saw in Paris, is something that lasts a long time. The BRE do have a lifespan of 100 years. We do actually have evidence of projects which are over 100 years old. I suppose that's the main reason why zinc is sustainable, is it lasts so long. But once it is taken off a roof, it's 100% recyclable. And indeed, about 99% of zinc is actually recycled. Furthermore, very, very little maintenance is needed. You don't really need to do anything to a zinc roof or a zinc wall. You might need to clean a zinc gutter out, but that's about it. And then on to the next slide. So we've gone from Paris, and now we're on Tyneside. This is North Shields, project by Simpson Hoff Architects, where you can see that they've taken inspiration from the Brewery Bond warehouse on the left side of the left photo, not only the geometry but also the color. And here again, pigmento red standing seam roofing has been used to clad the building with some interesting glazing units as well. And then on the next slide, I think this is just a sort of a summary. Obviously, that's a very, very quick run through what we can do. If you do need more information, samples, lists of contractors and so on, we'd be happy to do that. I'm just going to finish with a very, very short film that was recently made, which is part of Open House, about a project in Greenwich. So if we can run that.
Welcome to Bell Phillips Housing in Greenwich. The Royal Borough of Greenwich, with an ageing population, has an acute need for more homes for the over 60s, and at the same time, like much of London, have many families living in overcrowded accommodation. So they identified a number of underutilised garage sites, such as this one at Walnut Tree Road. So the plan was to bring these sites back to life, repair the public realm, and provide quality, accessible homes for older people to retire into. And at the same time, this would free up larger homes for families, providing a chain of benefit.
We've designed these houses on 6 different sites throughout the borough. And in order to achieve a really good economy of scale, we've created a single house topology that we've used across all of those sites. And the design of the houses is based on the HAPPY principles, which are a set of design guidance which aims to improve the quality of homes for elderly people. For example, good flexibility, good daylight, good ventilation. And we've achieved that here through an open plan kitchen, dining, living space and 2 bedrooms. The main bedroom is at the rear and at the front. The second bedroom is useful for a number of functions. For example, a workroom or a home office, or a space for visitors to stay, or even a place for a live-in carer to stay should that become necessary later in life. In order to make best use of the available site, we've built these houses quite close to the pavement edge, but with that comes the risk of losing privacy in your ground floor living space. So to combat that, we've created a double height living space with a big clear story up above. All of the daylight comes in from the upper level, allowing the window at ground floor to be quite modest and just give you a visual connection with the outside world without losing privacy. In terms of materials, we've used brick on the lower level, and we use zinc on the upper level dormers, and the scale of those dormers also relates, as you can see, to the 2- and 3-storey houses nearby to create a bungalow which nonetheless has a scale which is appropriate to the context. And the zinc from VM Zinc is also great in as much as it can be used on the vertical plane and a shallow and a steep pitch, so it works very well with the quite complex geometry of these butterfly roofs.
We've worked really hard to design for the needs of older people, and it's been really great to speak to some of the residents and hear their thoughts. Many really enjoy the generosity of space and the quality of light from the clear story, and one resident even said how they'd never quite lived in anything like it before.
It's interesting that the zinc originated in Paris in the 19th century, but here it is being used again in the 21st century in Greenwich in a slightly different format.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, very much. We haven't got a lot of time, but I'm just going to pick off one question for you from Alexandra Hawkins. You mentioned recycling zinc, but how easy is it to do?
Well, it's quite easy. One of the things about recycling is when it's economically viable, it works. So an installer I mean, this happens obviously a lot more in France, certainly in Paris, an installer that's replacing an old zinc roof will never throw it away. It's sort of considered almost like a 13th month. And across the UK, there's metal recycling, which is very common and efficient. Now, not all of the zinc sheet that is recycled is automatically used for zinc roofing again. Quite a lot might be used for brass production or zinc oxides. Some might be for zinc sheet. So it's actually quite an easy chain that has been set up for a long time.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for showing us such a range of projects and that lovely project by Bell Phillips as well in Greenwich. That was great. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now to a self-build project that is a wonderful example of how an architect can take an entrepreneurial leadership role in community housing, instigating self-build himself. Its architect, Darren Moore Hutchcraft, has probably one of the most intriguing CVs that I've ever come across. An experienced architect working for practice such as Squire & Partners, where he delivered a luxurious residential scheme in St John's Wood and a 27-storey hotel tower in Old Street. He's also worked with the innovative architect Philip Yuan at AKACommunity in Shanghai and taught with him on the esteemed master's programme at Tongji University. Yuan is best known for his pioneering use of robotics in fabrication and design, where he employs robotics in his own workshops to cut and assemble traditional materials into sensuously crafted buildings. A passionate advocate of self-build and community housing, Deramore is a partner of AKACommunity. The project that Darren Moore is going to present to us today was longlisted for this year's Mcewan Award. It is Laureates Place, a not-for-profit community-led housing scheme for 9 houses in Saddleworth near Oldham in Greater Manchester. Darren Moore not only sourced the land, but created the community itself, advertising for clients and making a company out of them. He then helped the families design their individual homes. It's a project I'm really looking forward to hearing about. So welcome to Darren Moore.
Hi, so I'm Darren Moore, and I was working at a time with AKACommunity to develop this project. We were based in Saddleworth, this is just outside Oldham, Manchester, the population 25,000 people. It's kind of in the Pennines, hill towns where they kind of have their own community spirit that kind of is passed down through that. And I was doing at the time PPS 7 houses, which are now NPPS 79 type houses. So this was one I designed for a local stonemason, and in Delft, one of the villages, and another one in one of the other villages called Diggle. This was built with straw bale and round earth type technologies. These houses were kind of defined by the fact that the people owned the land and came to me, oh, can you get me a house in the Greenbelt type thing? And the success of these getting planning was publicised in the press, the local press, and a number of people had contacted me who didn't have land, but it was quite difficult to find building plots of land that were didn't have clawback agreements or that kind of thing. So I thought about maybe forming up a type of find home community where people could buy a plot of land and build their own houses. So I managed to get, there's about 30 people to be honest, but 8 people that were really interested at when I first started. And we took that idea to Debbie Abrahams, the local Labour MP for the area. And off that, we got a grant for £70,000 from Eric Pickles, actually, the Conservative Minister, to push this kind of locally right to build, locally project funding. With that money, we helped find a site. We actually went through analysis with quite a few sites in the area. Some weren't appropriate. We found this site. It was in a little valley called Woodbrook in a place called Springhead, which is in Saddleworth. And it was a hobby scrapyard at the time. It had a lot of tree planting around the site, as you can see, and it hadn't been used as this kind of hobby scrapyard for a while. So it was classed as greenbelt development. So this is Jack Dormley, who came to the site with Debbie Abrahams, the MP. Jack Dormley was the shadow housing minister at the time, and the group met them. This is actually in a cafe near the site, and really engaged by that kind of meeting. We formed a draft constitution, and 9 people joined. Paul's just in red because he joined later, once the group had set off on the planning discovery, if you like. So we then hired a raft of consultants to advise us on the plot of land, and then completed the purchase of the land with some conveyancing issues, which did pose problematic actually later on, but all things were solved. One of the other elements of, because the site was in such a valley, and the sun path analysis really kind of had to think about the embodied energy of kind of micro renewables on that site. And maybe it's better for the group just to invest in like a local hydro scheme in the reservoirs, and help decarbonise electric grid in the whole of Britain, rather than just trying to help 9 houses with the money that we're going to invest in. So to come on to how we helped design the plot, I basically drew up different plot layouts, about 30 or 40. We then got the group voting on it on Doodle poll, sharing them on the Facebook group private group that we had with them. And things like, I personally thought that this end element here, part of the site, was a bit sloping and quite difficult to kind of manage with a house on it. So maybe we could just make that into a barbecue and get these nice square plots going off. However, one of the self-builders really loved this view of the Vrede, of this kind of little valley that was off that site. So we ended up designing a house that was going to view up that valley rather than kind of straight on, and kind of use the bedrooms as the roof of the bedrooms for the garden, and kind of maximise the use of that plot. Another element that we ended up changing with the group was we had set up all the plot boundaries from this kind of shape of the site, and instead we decided to make this plot 5 larger and square off all the other plots. Also, the 5 plots down the bottom, a lot of people really wanted to be on these what we call the bottom plots, and the 4 plots across the top, and it's kind of balanced out the size of plot to the kind of aspiration of living facing this greenbelt zone. We got all that priced up, so we could know roughly the kind of costs in decontaminating the site and having a service plot. And we started then designing 9 houses. As you can see, sporadic mix of housing view. So rather than the kind of typical design guide led by planning departments, we actually just reversed everything. We had the street at the back of the house, again, the street at the back of the house, living on the top floor, bedrooms underneath. So there's back to front, upside down houses. Rather than treating the streetscape as the important vista for these, we made the streetscape the back, and the front, the views that we wanted, rather than the kind of typical house developer-led approach that kind of ticks all the boxes for a design guide. And you can see actually why the housing developer one ticks all the boxes for planners. I mean, it's much easier to understand that house is going to look good, whereas that, who knows what we're even looking at. So that led on to designing the 9 houses, thinking about the back plots and front plots. And to visualize it, I decided to put it all into a program called Lumion, so that people could really look around the whole site and understand how all their houses interrelated. So this was a nice visuals. 9 houses. So that's one plot, plot 9. And just to go on about how I helped them design their own houses. So this is plot 1, Mark Bay. He designed this this house thinking about the slope in a Lego app that he had downloaded, and he really wanted this terracing effect. So then we worked on it with cost and trying to figure out with him what he actually wanted, and crinkle windows and things, and these balconies at different levels, and kind of produce this element, this terraced house that's terracing down the slope. So that was that house. Another interesting development was Gaynor. She liked to go on holiday in the Varndine. She loved those houses, and she just said to me, "Can I have a house like they have in the old cottage in the Varndine up there?" I was like, "Why not? I don't know." So she drew up this in Microsoft Word, which is incredible, with charts and things. And then I translated that with Photoshop into a kind of design for a house, and then into this VR environment for her, where you can see double height living spaces, multiple pitch roofs is what they kind of have in this Varndine setting, snugs, and a kind of private terrace overlooking this beautiful view and gardens. And that was all then compiled up and stuck on public Facebook group that we had. You can see it reached 18,000 people advertising, get in touch if you like these kind of houses, help us support, get this through planning. And we got in the local press, and we had some community consultations in the local pub, Spinners Arms, where we got quite a lot of the local neighbours, over 30 from the local 200 metres from the site, all supporting it. There were a few objections, of course, but we dealt with some of those issues personally, like me going into people's houses and asking them the problem.
Hi there, Deramore. Stuart here. Hi, could you just speak up a little bit? We just got a few minutes. If you could just kind of project a bit more, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
That was then turned into kind of architectural planning drawings, which were then submitted to planning, and we received planning the first time around, unanimous decision by the planners. Then to celebrate that, we planted 2,000 saps, which were going to form the hedgerows between the houses in the future development, so they would grow up and you have more established hedgerow 3 or 4 years later. It was built. Laureates Place Heads of Agreement was then drawn up, where each person had to pay basically £10,000 to cover the cost of the site decontamination, and also the terracing of the site. There's a big brought in, so the diggers were brought in. Actually, it was self-built. This is Martin. He was part of the actual heavy construction on this project. Ryan and Martin, fantastic. Decontaminated the site. Jack Toe, one of Ryan's and Martin's contacts, came in, cleared off loads of the kind of contaminated issues with the site, such as Japanese knotweed and a lead issue. And the site plots were then given connected to electric and sewage and water and things. And then everyone who paid into that amount, had got their plot given to them for them to then go and get mortgages on and things like that, which was an important part of the scheme. A lot of these people actually lived in rented accommodation, and this was going to be the first time they would have a house. And a few people figured out that they couldn't get a mortgage, or they different reasons. Life had changed in that 1.5 year process, and they sold off or didn't complete with this, and that was sold on to different people. Rachel Summers' case, and those people hired, for example, other architects to design their houses, which I'll show you some images of later. And some of the other plots carried on. This process of getting mortgages and that kind of thing took about 1.5 years for them, and to kind of figure out how they're going to finance this whole build as a collective. And they went with some local architecture technologists to finish up the builds. Also, I'm going to talk about 2 of the designs, Melanie's and Steve's, plot 4 and plot 6. and how that went forward, how the designs came about in a bit more detail. So Melanie's was a top plot, interesting top plot because it didn't have anybody in front of them and was kind of off to the other side. At first, we started with this idea that we have a raised deck with a kind of greenhouse conservatory on top, but the heating model really didn't work. It got overheated quite fast. So then and actually even windows are basically were overheating. So we ended up with much smaller windows, but really picking out what they're going to focus on, and this kind of large balcony in front. And the car was to kind of park up at the top and have a bridge in to the living level, just still on that sort of balcony. So, and still have this view connection to this field, which is full of horses, which you'll see about later. So the open plan living for Melanie, with an office to the left when she comes in, with its own toilet, is quite important for her because she worked from home, and then having a spare bedroom for a guest, 2 bedrooms for a guest, and her ensuite, which had a kind of walk-in wardrobe. And so interestingly, this was designed with these picture windows. And this is when it started to get built. This is Martin and Ryan getting this site all leveled up here. And here's just a picture of me showing Melanie at the time. This is where our house is going to be. You can see all the Japanese metal there. Melanie got her house built kind of turnkey, kind of, well, shell and core actually. Shell and core by David Gore from Hayward. Fantastic timber frame. The site was immaculate every time I went around. You can see the bridge going into the first floor level and these large picture windows and the gardening that Melanie had worked with. So this is David Gore again. I mean, immaculate site all the time. Anytime I went around, it was timber framed and windows put in, and then the floors in, and you can see how the kind of space is this open plan kitchen led to an open plan living room. This is the left, and then you kind of I positioned windows so that people could really see through into the kind of landscape beyond. That's a picture from Melanie's living room here, and you can in the house lit light. So I could just go to plot 6 at the bottom, which was he was really interested in designing his own home and really got in about how he wanted this garden to the south, avoid all this living space and spill out into this garden, and a little greenhouse, this kind of a conservatory kind of thing facing the green space. So that was the kind of drawn up in Photoshop basically. And then I was looking at trying to convincing him to have this entrance way into a void above his living room and then spreading out. This then evolved into trying to develop more green space on the high level, a carport rather than an integrated garage here, and splitting up this conservatory, living void and then conservatory, which was space this kind of the field with all the horses in it. So that was then costed up with the QS and the engineer edge, thinking about all the retaining structures and priced up. And the price was quite high, so we ended up cutting 3/4 of the price down by consolidating the design, but not losing any elements, such as this kind of conservatory and living room ended up forming into one block here. So you come in now from this carport into a home office, which is important for him again, because into a kitchen zone, which had a void over the living room below, and below that was a media room, which could be turned into a second bedroom. And his master suite, closet to bathroom, and another bedroom here. So this was then thinking about how this curtain glazing would work on this double height space, how the carport is going to interact with the house, and this was then the house design with the green roof. And again, all done collectively. All these designs were pushed through at the same time by me, so involved working with all the people instantly and designing each house so we could have them all visualized together. Such as this. You can see house was next to Steve's house. Then the interiors, thinking about how the oak frame would work, we came up with this crook sling brace feature all over the step where the open void is. Yet the rest of the kind of design was just a curve pre-imposed. So West Wind took that forward. They provided a great service of SIPS panels and the oak frame and the glazing by all together was managed by the West Wing, and this all then went to planning. So this was then taken forward after planning, after the decontamination. There's about a year delay, well, not really delay for the self-builders. They're full on trying to get finance for plots. They're quite low budget. So Melanie's was David Gore's house was built for £140,000. This house was.
Hi, Deramore. I'm just going to stop you now because we need to wrap up the presentation. I'm really aware as well that a lot of people who've been intrigued by what you've shown us today and the experience of self-build. So just to ask you a couple of questions there, really, and make sure we just have some time for that. So I'm really sorry to stop you in your tracks there.
This house was delivered. These houses were delivered by Whitaker's, a local architect and technologist, after planning. I just wanted to add that because it may have got misplaced. These are some of their.
Okay, so Darren, the question, one of the questions that's sort of arising is how as an architect you really make that leap to being a self-builder, and what tip would you give to other architects who are going to do that? Because I could see that you've been working really closely.
Well, a lot of my projects before were self-build related anyway. So it was doing a private house for somebody who had a greenbelt light slot. So the only difference was helping people form companies together. And I had support from a company called a charity called Unlimited, who gave me a grant. Not just the government grant, but also Unlimited gave me grants to kind of help understand how different company formations would help this group form together. So, and then other than that, it was just a normal process of leading someone through how do they commission their own houses. So, and design.
A lot of education, really. Thank you for a fantastic. We've had lots of mentions on the chat about what fantastic visuals they were, and you know, the kind of investment that you put in for those individual homeowners and self-builders is just fantastic. So thank you so much, Deramore, for that. We're going to just move on now to talk to Irina Hughes for a talk from Irina Hughes and Robert Saunders at Ibstock. Used for house building in Britain since the medieval period, brick construction only became prevalent for housing across the country when its mass production fueled the expansion of our towns and cities in the 19th century. If most of us asked what a typical British house was, a lot of us would probably say a Victorian brick terrace. Ibstock's history of brick making dates back to the 1820s, when the first coal shaft was sunk at Ibstock in Leicestershire. Ever since then, they've been advancing brick making processes. Today, Ibstock's design advisors, Irina Hughes and Robert Saunders, are here to highlight the evolution of the brick soffit from its traditional form to the advanced, lightweight, easy to install Nexus range of modern brick faced soffits and lintels. So I'm going to turn over now to Irina and Robert.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the short version of Ibstock's The Evolution of Brick Soffits seminar. So as I said before, my name's Rob and I'm a member of Ibstock's design advisory team.
And I'm a designer with Ibstock Brick too. Before we start, we're just going to take a minute to think about the soffit. It can have a huge impact on the facade. As you can see from the visual, we can offer a wide range of soffits from the Victorian Gothic inspired through to the linear contemporary style. It can help to create large openings which can let in a lot of light and create depth and interest to an otherwise flat elevation. So Ibstock Brick itself as a company is approximately 200 years old, and this falls in line with the start of the Victorian period, or roughly thereabouts, which heavily relied on brick as a construction material. The Industrial Revolution gathered momentum during this period, and this brought about with it successive changes to the way that buildings were constructed. Consequently, this era saw vast differences in architecture within a relatively short space of time. So early Victorian buildings typically incorporated more complex and elaborate design features because they usually used just one material, in this case brick, and it was used en masse to create a sound structure. Arches were also used to not only be self-supporting, but also to help support the loads from above. As the Victorian period progressed, the style became much simpler due to the development of new materials. They no longer used just one material to create the structure, but advancements in steel, brick and glass allowed for simpler design and construction. The Royal Albert Docks in Liverpool used no wood in its construction, so it became the first non-combustible warehouse system in the world.
During this period of architecture, brick arches were manufactured using traditional methods of construction. So a traditional brick arch is constructed on site using timber formers, which imitate the shape of the finished arch. Arch bricks are cut on site from a standard brick and are known in the industry as a voussoir. So the bricklayer will begin from the centre, cutting what's known as the key brick first. The remaining brick locations are then marked on the timber former using a string line connected to the striking point of the arch, working from the key brick location outwards. Once the locations are marked and the bricks are cut, the bricklayer will begin to work from the spring point inwards. And the final point is to install the key brick, allowing the timber former to be removed, revealing the self-supporting brick arch.
As we move into the 20th century, the architectural style of the modernist period was based upon new and innovative construction technology, particularly with steel and now reinforced concrete. There was a movement towards functionalism and also an embrace of minimalism during this period. This became more dominant after World War II, where there was a need to quickly construct buildings of function, but there was also a desire to build a better world. Battersea Power Station is a classic example of the modernist period. From afar, the brutalist design embraces the minimalist style, but upon closer inspection, the intricate use of projecting bricks and vertical soldier course panels, coupled with the deep, flat-gauged arches and soffits to the windows, create more interest and depth to the elevations. The modernist period lasted into the 1980s before being gradually replaced by postmodern architecture.
So whilst traditional brick openings could be formed using manual construction methods on site, as we've previously discussed, there is this is very time consuming and it's labour intensive and therefore required a high level of craftsmanship. And for those reasons, one of the early methods of prefabrication of brick soffits is the concrete backed system. This comprised of brick slips either cast into or bonded onto a concrete structure. And as these were constructed off-site in factory controlled conditions, this led to improved quality whilst reducing the on-site labour time, allowing a one-piece unit to be installed. And as you can see, it created the same aesthetic appearance as traditional construction methods.
Although contemporary architecture includes the last 20 years of the 20th century, it is predominantly the architecture of the 21st century that really defines this period. And interestingly, no single architectural style particularly dominates this period. Contemporary architects have inspired a variety of styles, from high-tech postmodernism to highly conceptual and expressive designs. But what we find is in common with all of these styles is the use of very advanced technology, such as computer-aided design and modern methods of construction. Together, these are allowing buildings to be built taller, lighter, and stronger than ever before. We're also seeing a prominent use of colour in 21st century architecture. And Damien Hirst's HQ in Beat Street uses Ibstock's shimmering glazed bricks, long linear lines with angle jambs and fairly deep soffits to again create depth and interest to the elevations.
So brick manufacturers recognised that they needed to create more cost-effective solutions that could be more easily handled on site. And in response to this, in response to these needs, the manufacturers looked at combining the strength of steel units with the natural beauty of the clay brick to create a system which gave the same appearance but as a lighter solution. And these systems are on average 70% lighter than their precast alternatives. So Ibstock Kevington's Nexus original system is a chemically fixed solution with a BBA accreditation. And these chemically fixed solutions have been successfully specified for a number of years. So using a stainless steel tray, each system is designed and manufactured with chemically bonded brick slips, which can be formed into a number of configurations to create the aesthetics desired by the architect. Boundaries are consistently being pushed by the architects as they become more creative with the system. Although there hasn't been a significant movement in architectural trend, following the devastating events that occurred at the Grenfell Tower in 2017, obviously we know that there's been a vast change in building regulations which has affected design and construction in the UK.
Particularly to approve document B relating to fire safety, which was amended, as we all know, back in April 2019. The amendments include a change to the specification of external materials or cladding to buildings over 18 metres in height in England, Northern Ireland and Wales. The same specification is also required in Scotland, but this is for buildings of 11 metres and above. The minimum requirement for these buildings is now Class A2 S1D0, and only materials of this specification or better are to be accepted. Following an independent review of fire safety by industry leaders at the Building a Safer Future conference, one of the recommendations to the government is the 18-metre rule in England, Northern Ireland and Wales should be brought down to 11 metres to be more in line with Scotland. It is felt that a blanket rule across the UK would be more uniform, easier to comply with and create less ambiguity. So we use the Euroclass system, which is a combination of tests which define a product's contribution to fire. The reaction to fire categorises products into one of 7 classes. Class A1 products are described as having no contribution to fire, so they are non-combustible, and materials such as brick, steel and stone meet this classification. Class A2 products are described as having no significant contribution to fire, so they are of limited combustibility. And classifications B to F are described as combustible, and products are categorised based on their varying levels of combustibility. So we know how a material is rated in terms of its reaction to fire, and I'm sure you've all seen in the marketplace products that are rated as an A1 or A2 product as part of their marketing strategy. But there are further tests that have an important impact on a product's reaction to fire. But what does the S1D0 mean? So the S refers to smoke production, and the results can range from S1 right the way through to S3. And D refers to flaming droplets, with test results ranging from D0 through to D2. These tests produce a combined classification, but the classifications are not necessarily linear in format. And as we all know, the products that we specify in buildings over 18 metres need to be Class A2 S1D0 or better.
So these amendments to approve document B have led to the creation of Ibstock Kevington's Nexus XI, which is a stainless steel, mechanically fixed, engineered brick slip soffit solution with BBA accreditation. So the QR code on the screen now is active if you were to scan it with your phone. The system itself has been designed to mechanically fix components using standard interfaces. So it was given a very modular design approach to give as much flexibility to the system to allow it to answer the architectural trends of the future. The system has 3 independent mechanical fixings, the first being a front tab, which is into the Nexus XI tray, and therefore it's a stainless steel fixing. It's in essence a ledge that allows each pistol brick to sit onto to create that mechanical fixing. The second variation is an internal fixing, sub-assembly consisting of the M3 Ibstock Kevington slotted nut, which was designed, which is a bespoke design for Nexus XI, and that engages with a set screw and a 28mm diameter circular washer. It's the circular washer itself which engages with the engineered brick slip to create that mechanical fixing. How that sub-assembly interacts with the rest of the product, there's keyholes cut into the stainless steel tray. The brick slips are positioned in the corresponding location with the required mechanical fixings. Those mechanical fixings are engaged into the keyhole and then pushed further into the keyhole to allow the circular washer to engage with the groove on the engineered brick slip. And then finally, those fixings are torqued up to the required setting before the product is finished. The final mechanical fixing is again a sub-assembly. It's what we call a rear clip. So it consists of M4 riv nut with an L-shaped stainless steel bracket which engages with the engineered brick slip, and that's held in place by a set screw. So that gives you an understanding of the product makeup and how it works.
As you can see, both the chemically and mechanically fixed units can produce seamless and endless soffits, only limited by your own imagination. Thanks for listening, and we're happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Irina and Robert. I've got a couple of questions from the chat lined up from you. I've got one from Richard Price, and he says, can you confirm if weathering details, flashings, coping and capping increase the lifespan and reduce maintenance of brickwork and therefore increase the sustainability of brickwork?
I'll let you go, Rob.
To go. So that was in relation.
That was in relation to if the weathering details such as flashings, copings and cappings, which help reduce maintenance and therefore increase the lifespan, then actually help with sustainability?
Yeah, I think for a brick coping or capping, it's obviously all going to be in relation to the specific detail that's being provided. I.e., if you were to put, let's say, a brick on with its bed face visible, it would be far less durable than if it was put on its face. And also the special brick being specified to have a coping rather than a capping, so to have an overhang with a weather drip throating, that would aid the sort of durability and lifespan of, let's say, a freestanding wall or a parapet detail.
That's great, thank you. I think we're going to have to finish there, but again, if anyone's got any questions for you, please stay around and respond to the chat. And is there any way that you could just tell people how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so on Ibstock's website, we do have a sort of design service page, which should include all our contact details, as myself, Ray, and also one of our colleagues who's based in Scotland as part of the design advisory service. So our emails and mobile numbers are also on there to contact us. But
okay, well, thank you so much, Robert and Irina. That was great. Thank you. So we're going to move on now to our very final project today, and it's also our largest one. It's a large-scale housing development, Wallace Fields, just outside Maidstone in Kent, working with Housing Association Golden Homes. A.H.R. transformed and improved a 1960s estate by master planning and designing this three-phase development that included the delivery of 180 homes. The design draws on Kent's vernacular with its inclusion of weatherboard cladding and render and mixture of flat and pitched roofs. David D'Souza, who is director at A.H.R, is here to talk us through the development. He has extensive expertise in the residential and mixed-use sectors, an expert in modern methods of construction, including modular and volumetric design. He leads projects for local authorities, housing associations and private developers. Thank you so much. Handing over to David now.
Thank you, Helen. I trust everybody can see my screen okay. Is that, I just have a quick thumbs up?
Yeah, that's good. That's
fantastic. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. So finally, last but not least, I'm just going to run through our scheme that we've done for Wallace Avenue, which was for our client, Golding Homes. So this is the view of the scheme completed. I'm just going to take you on a little journey of how we got there. So firstly, a little bit about our practice. So as Helen's already said, we are a large architectural practice, which also do building consultancy. We employ currently 350 people across the UK and 2 international offices. We operate across 8 key sectors. We have a legacy that goes back to 1835, which I don't think many practices can actually say. We are on 35 different frameworks, and we are one of the first practices to achieve BIM Level 2 certification from the BSI. So what makes us different? We are a multi-sector practice. We work across the different ranges. So I lead the residential. We have expertise within education, infrastructure, civic, office and workplace, healthcare, technology, industry, leisure and hospitality, and finally retail. As you can see from the images on the right, we don't have a signature architectural style. We like to develop our vision with our clients and stakeholders, and we like to unwrap DNA of a project through consultation, collaboration and innovation. And we also like to think of sustainable communities which are sensitive to local needs and cultural diversity. So the project itself, so it's for Golding Homes. It's located in Maidstone, Kent. It's for 92 apartments and 110 new houses and development areas of 3.8 hectares. The project value is 50%. And unusually with this scheme, the client Golding Homes has retained the majority of the houses for affordable rent and market rent, with only 2% being shared ownership. It was commenced, or our design involvement commenced in 2014, and the last phase was eventually completed in 2019. So this was the part we would at state when we picked up in 2014. It was a 1960s, 70s development that was built for social housing, and it became, once desirable, it had started to suffer in its last years from problems of this typology and housing. There was a lack of distinction between public and private realm. There was no defined ownership of boundaries. The new blight that as the refuse bins wasn't really designed into the development in the 60s and 70s. And you can see here that it just became an eyesore. Cars are obviously sort of more focused on a development as well, so it's predominantly car-led, and there was no sort of space or integration for the public realm. It led to a lot of antisocial behaviour, and this was starting to create a bad name for the site and the development. So the resolution was that we left a few options. We did look at trying to retain elements of it and repurpose them, but the buildings, due to their nature and the age, had really served their design life. There was very little we could do internally. The layouts weren't flexible. The construction was very limited. Floor to ceiling heights weren't what we obviously have and aspire to in current standards. And they have become known as development for our clients in terms of maintenance, and also from a health and well-being for residents. The environments inside were not very pleasant, and issues with heating and keeping the environment safe and moisture-free was really challenging. So this is just an aerial view of the estate before development, just to reinforce what I was just illustrating in those pictures, that there's quite a lot of heavy tarmacked area. Reliance is more on the car, or dominated by the car. A lot of permeability, lack of ownership, and sort of the street frontages weren't very well defined. So using our expertise, we were able to work with the community first. So it's obviously understanding the issues of the site, trying to get into what residents actually feel and thought and treasured about the site, and trying to create a group of residents that became actually our volunteers. We undertook a planning for real engagement with the local residents, and we tried to sort of bring about different methods of communication with them. Obviously trying to use models, physical models, also using computer visuals, drawings, sketches. And we held over 20 events which had a different degree of focus, Some were more tactile, others were more the drop-in. So we actually had a 4-day drop-in centre for the development. And the key messages that kept coming out from the problems of the estate was sort of safety, antisocial issues, lack of ownership. So residents didn't feel that they were able to take ownership of their properties. There was an untidy environment, was unwelcoming. There was reliance on cars, and it made the space unsafe for children to play in the streets. So we were keen to try and restore some good principles of housing development and sort of bring back some of those objectives to the site plan and the site. So this is the developed master plan that we got consent for. It was delivered over 3 phases, and it tries to address all the issues that we had learnt about the site and obviously about the place, drawing strong elements together. So one of the things, the key moves is obviously you can see on the plan is that the streets are now well defined. There's clear definition of what's private and public. The residents have their own front doors, their own private spaces. The roads, we've introduced home zones into the development, which negate the speed for cars. It puts more of a reliance back on giving the streets back to people and cyclists and residents themselves. Delivered into 3 phases. So obviously the first phase is on the left, second phase is onto the right, and the final phase, just highlighted in blue. And the reason it was phased is that obviously it's a decanting process, so we're just conscious of trying to keep the number of moves for the residents down to a minimum, so that you had to go into one move rather than 2 or 3 across the site. So just a few more details of how we responded to the issues, as I just talked about. So the main move was also reducing the number of apartments on the development, so trying to get back to more houses, family housing, using traditional principles of good urban design, and creating and enhancing the new local community and commercial centre. So where we took our inspiration is obviously, as we said, we don't have a style, so we look at local content, local influences, and this was a lovely town in Kent called Hastings, and our inspiration was looking at the old fishermen's huts that they still use, and how some of the colours and the weatherboarding is a very Kent vernacular, common vernacular. And what's also interesting is the roof pitches and how this articulation can actually add variety in the street scene. So we're breaking down the streets. As this is a production related RIBA talk, we've included just some materials that we've looked at. So some of the roofs using dark slate to sort of draw on the weatherboarding that we're using. We used the Marley alternate cedaril cladding for the elevations, and then adding punctuation of colours to key corners. We've used the Trespa panels, and they were complemented with the door entrances as well. So this is how the site now looks. So responding to the challenge, we've looked at trying to maximise views of the asset, which was to the south of our site, which is the large public realm and existing park owned by the local authority. So how we could just, again, give residents a really, really beautiful view of that site, keeping the mature trees as part of the focus of terminating streets and giving people vistas through. And then obviously looking at internally the roads, which have a priority put back on to the residents, traffic calming measures, so staggering and weaving the road so it's not just a rat run through an estate is important, and also complementing new and existing trees into a more cohesive landscape and public realm. So within the centre of the site, we did create a new heart, so lots of local amenities within development. So within there, we also had a health centre, or have a health centre, which provides a lot of services for health and well-being and supports residents. It has a community cafe, which provides affordable fresh meals and beverages in a very relaxed environment. And it also helps, obviously, to bring the community together and create connections so people can get to know their neighbours, and sort of evokes and strengthens that relationship back with community. So one of the key things that we've measured is obviously the Parkwood estate initially was ranked on one of the government's indices of deprivation at 1,979, and that was at the beginning of our development works. We've seen through the interventions that we've made and the client through Golding Homes that this has now risen to a much healthier number of 2,915. So in terms of the scale, it's obviously improved. We believe that significant step is due to the response that we've made with the architecture. So obviously it's complemented by the better access to employment, health services, and the quality of housing that we've brought through to the scheme. So just a couple more views of the development that I wanted just to share with you. So obviously enhanced public realm, trying to create more family orientated houses. Positive surveillance of streets is really important. So how you turn and provide surveillance of corner houses. We developed a bespoke house for this scenario, which is reflected here. These are 4-bedroom family homes. And it's been such a success that even some of the local residents, we have a local mum, has actually said the area's grown up. Crime has definitely been lowered. The community is great, and everyone knows everybody, and you always get a good morning. And I think as architects, that's something we can really take as a positive, that we're doing something right and going in the right direction. Every developer or every unit and home on the development is tenure blind, so there is no distinction between the mix or the housing that we're providing. And the scale is sympathetic to its context as well. So it's only really the heart, community heart, that's slightly higher. The balance of the site is much lower and reflects the sort of grain around the area. And I think one of the innovative elements of this scheme was how people live in the 21st century. Obviously, things have moved on with COVID now, and things are continually changing and evolving. But we wanted to sort of deal with the issue of bins and storage, and the houses that we've designed have actually got these sort of enlarged storage facilities that become part of the pop-out elevations and composition of the house, and they sort of take off. You've got somewhere safe to put your bicycle or your pram. You've got your recycling bins all within this purpose-built entrance porch, which is secure and can only be accessed by the residents themselves. And then, obviously, in terms of sustainability, this was government-led funding, so we did have to meet COVID Sustainable Homes Level 3 minimum standards, and that was done through fabric only. So we managed to achieve that through well-insulated walls and high-performance windows. So that is obviously a tick. We didn't require any additional PV panels to sort of hit the targets. And then finally, I think it's just internally, obviously, the residents are much happier with the layouts that we're providing and delivered. This is actually a class that was viewing the site while they were a local school that we were engaging with the contractor, that they could come and have a look around the building site and maybe get some of them keen to become architects and other professionals. And finally, obviously, it just reflects the fact that development now is fit for purpose. It's sort of homes that residents, or creates homes that residents can sort of enjoy and meets the sort of needs of the 21st century. So that's it from my side, Helen.
Thanks so much, David, and for running absolutely to time. That was
I 15? Okay.
That was perfect, absolutely perfect. And we're getting some really positive feedback about your excellent scheme, David. I'd like to ask you, I'm just going to wait for some questions to come through, but I'm going to ask you about the point you made about changing the way people live and how how much do the new homes, family homes, differ from the old family homes in terms of internal planning and, you know, ground floor floor plans in terms of use of social space and that kind of thing?
Well, I think obviously the site or the development before was predominantly one-bed apartments, so there was quite a transient community. There was no sort of desire to remain there. It had a poor perception with the local community. So by putting in, changing the mix immediately by creating family homes, we started looking at obviously how people live at the moment and what their needs are. So the layouts are obviously minimum standards of the housing design standards, or the were applied in this area. So that's the National Described Standards. But we try and also encourage our clients to not just measure things by the Excel sheet, and where possible to promote better environment internally. So we looked at obviously the additional storage space, pushing that out. I think understanding also how people live within their home. Like families want to interact, they want more open plans, living space. So I can share some of the layouts of these houses, but they are open plan, they're flexible. We were also thinking obviously about lifetime homes and how things can change. So we're trying to encourage people to actually remain in the house, and the house will adapt to your needs as opposed to you having to move again. So it's creating that longevity, I think. What we try and do with this
design. Very clear about the interior planning. I've got a question from Mariangela Parisi for you, and she says the study of materials in the project is impressive. Is there any particular principle you use to pick materials and colour palette?
So an interesting story is that the colours are actually, we also went as far as looking at beach huts. So I don't know, we've got a very wide audience today, and the English are very famous for having their beach huts all painted in different colours. So we also took inspiration from those, and I do have a slide on the beach huts, but I tried to take it out. But that's what we were trying to bring. So it's looking at local context, I think, is the theme of today. Lots of the panellists, people showing their examples. I think good architecture should always embed it in context. So you study the context first, you create something that's familiar. But I think as architects, we should always be trying to reinvent things and create a new way of expressing materials, rather than, you know, too many developers on this call, but the cookie cutter developer house types, I think we all know we're trying to avoid. So that's how we work as a practice. As I work as an individual, I always try and take inspiration from context.
And I think it shows through in the final scheme as well, with the fantastic placemaking as well as materials and colours. I'm going to close now, but thank you, David.
Thank you.
For finishing our seminar. I want to say a big thank you to all our speakers, to the architects, to the product manufacturers who's also sponsored the event, and also thank you to the audience as well. We've had the biggest audience we've ever had for a PiP seminar today. We've had over 1,000, still over 750 with us for this talk. So thank you everybody for joining us. Such a great webinar today. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.